The girl reminded Lloyd that perfect alchemy lives and dies by fresh ingredients, and it hit him because that's the exact same rule he's preached his whole life, like it was carved into stone. Lloyd insisted he'd stayed fresh, but she slammed him right down, no excuses, and everything he showed up with didn't even pass the bare minimum. I found zero answers, so I buried myself in memories of being 19 back when I worked in some plain, everyday pharmacy. His eyes locked onto that flower like a ghost of a flirt she never meant to keep. He could still taste how he'd chased it for a week, burning on no sleep, rushing back after 3 days, and then she just tossed it in the trash like it was nothing. She's the kingdom's crown jewel, a brilliant alchemist who's whipped up hundreds of magical artifacts and potions, all like pure genius. But for Lloyd, she wasn't just strict, she was a full-on devil. One little slip would set her off, and in that lab nothing could be anything but perfect, no exceptions. Another punchline failure, another day dumped, at least that's what she believed, blaming the materials again and again and again, until Lloyd snapped and tried to argue back. Alchemy's a two-part beast. One side cooks up formulas, the other hunts down the ingredients, and each half has to do its job. Ruby had a flawless reputation, 100% success in every recipe she cooked up and every synthesis she made, a total genius. And Lloyd's fundraising only pulled in a measly 40% success rate, leaving people with nothing but cold, pitying looks. That's only half of what a normal assistant magician scores, so his result is a total disgrace to any lab that's trying to do it right. She snapped, "We won't hit the deadline again ever," and then pointed the finger like it was obvious. He's the one who's responsible, and the Tor's family name just took another brutal hit. She asked if he understood a single thing, then reminded him that his job was to deliver the ingredients on time and in perfect quality. Lloyd bowed his head and squeaked out an apology while Ruby ground her teeth like she was about to explode. She snapped, "If you've got the strength to apologize, then stop talking and finally do it." And she ripped into him, calling him useless, slow, and clumsy. Lloyd offered another quiet apology, but she snapped even harder, enough with the apologies every second. He muttered that smashing stuff during a tantrum was shameful, but even if he said it out loud, she'd wave it off like, "Who are you to tell me what to do?" The world's already ruthless, and then Ruby's emotional pain comes crashing down on top of it. He just couldn't take it anymore, his breaking point had finally hit. Lloyd snapped his eyes shut with everything he had, and then, without warning, he threw down the words. Now was the moment to end it all and bring every last bit of this crashing down. He spun around and stammered out, nerves on fire, that he didn't want to be her assistant anymore. He was done, so she could handle everything by herself. Ruby froze on the spot, his words hitting her like a punch, then her eyes went dead empty. Just a second, she slid into the chair like nothing happened, told him to come back by evening, and promised curry for dinner. Lloyd went stone still, eyes bulging wide as panic hit. He snapped again, "This is the real ending, no coming back." She just flicked her hand like, "Relax, no need to turn this into a scene," and then made it clear, "If you're leaving, then go." She'd hit her limit with his personality, and she was done burning her energy on him. Lloyd roared, slammed open his item box, "No more talking, it's go time, run." He didn't care where, anywhere, just get him out of this place, away from the pain, the humiliation, and that non-stop disdain. Suddenly, something new caught his eye in the box. He demanded what she'd shoved in there, and Ruby answered with total indifference, just a note asking to buy Earl Grey plus a little good luck on escaping home. Rage hit him like a wave. Seriously, even now another errand. This woman, later he finally calmed, falling silent as he scanned the room because the choice was made, but his heart still felt hollow. The moment the emotions spilled out, he snapped into instant relief. But then came the gut punch. What now? The whole world stretched out ahead of him, yet every path felt wrong. And then it hit, quick as lightning. Why is he grabbing Earl Grey again? Did slavery carve itself into his bones? His eyes snapped up, and there it was, the dragon's sword hanging in the sky. Those massive wings snapped open, and he took flight. No chains, no orders, no one controlling his will. Real freedom. Tears burned in his eyes as he watched the dragon soar. He wanted that freedom, that strength, that total independence. But right then a girl's voice cut in. "Mom, look, that loser is crying." And her mom just brushed it off with a cold warning to stay away from someone like him. Lloyd rose to his feet, strode ahead without a single glance back, and felt a decision ignite in his chest. New start, fresh slate, and a brand new life waiting to be built. Then he slid into the carriage, grinning because they were finally moving forward, like every painful memory had been left in the dust. Clutched in his hands was a book, and in his mind burned a bright future. He pictured a whole city where nobody knew his name, a fresh start from nothing, and then his eyes drifted to a nearby pair. A boy and a girl, leaning together like they were quietly sharing a secret. The girl's cheeks flared with a blush at how close they were, while the boy cracked a calm joke about how cramped the carriage felt, all bathed in gentle, romantic light. Lloyd stared in stunned silence as she confessed her heart goes wild the moment he's near. Then she said his name, Mars, and the whole room instantly turned warm, bright, and electric. Lloyd snapped his eyes away, panicking inside and begging they'd ignore the fact he was even there. Because he didn't hate their feelings, he just couldn't stop them from stabbing him with the truth. Things were different with Ruby. They weren't lovers in his eyes, more like a lady and the servant watching their own distance grow. A sudden memory hit her like lightning, another Ruby, the one she used to be. The moment she spotted his tears, she snapped, "Don't cry," and he sniffled back, "I'm just hungry," and though she scolded him, it wasn't cruel, she meant it with all her heart. His apologies only fueled the tears, and she snapped, shouting in pure irritation. But even after everything, she still thrust a piece of bread into his hands and promised, "You'll be the country's greatest alchemist." She dreamed it all her life, an orphan from a shelter. She wanted to live like a noblewoman and bite into bread any time she pleased. She asked Lloyd to be her assistant, and he nodded and quietly agreed, still gripping the bread in his hands. Ever since then, they threw themselves headfirst into the work, each locked into their own role, so consumed by their dreams that they didn't notice a single thing around them. Their hard work showered Atara in glory. Ruby even got a noble title and the world's praise for being an absolute genius as an alchemist. But when she claimed that title, her humanity slipped away. Day by day, arrogance took over until she couldn't see past herself. Carriage slammed to a stop. Lloyd jolted, eyes wide. What just happened? That curly-haired girl snapped, her voice loud as a siren. She was yelling at full volume, and Lloyd immediately shot back. "Is this about the monster?" The boy swallowed his pride and apologized, saying she always blurts out whatever's in her head. Then Lloyd just smirked and headed out to check, until a scream tore through the air and the girl shook with fear, calling for Mars. Right in front of them loomed a towering, worm-like nightmare, bigger than anything they'd ever faced. She froze for a second, completely unsure what to do, then flat-out admitted she couldn't handle it, and the guy snapped back that it's pointless to quit before even trying. With a fierce, tear-bright vow, he promised he'd guard her with his life on the line. She confessed her love, completely moved, and Lloyd froze on the spot, hit with a storm of tangled feelings. Bitter envy clawed at him. There was no way something like that could ever come between him and Ruby, yet he still stepped in to help the couple, telling the guy he'd faced the same kind of monster before and offering his advice, and the guy thanked him with real sincerity. Lloyd told them the monster's weak spot is its head, hit it there with a sword, and they'll snatch victory. The couple shared a baffled look and the boy blurted, "How are we even supposed to reach the head? Look how huge it is." Lloyd just grinned and said, "Get in, then keep your focus." Both froze, then the girl leaned in and hissed, "Don't trust the introvert." Lloyd snapped in place. Wait, was she calling him an introvert again? But there was zero time to react. The monster lunged, and the couple froze in pure panic. Lloyd snapped into action. He snatched up both of them and started chanting, with magic blasting off him like a crackling lightning storm. A violent explosion ripped the world apart, the air shook, and the monster got blasted straight into the eye of a magical storm. The beast went limp with shock and the couple froze in stunned silence, while Lloyd stayed calm and said, "Yeah, the head had to be taken off," and the guy admitted he'd wiped out the entire body. Lloyd fumbled with the back of his head, blurted out an apology for giving totally off advice, and the boy still thanked him sincerely, until the girl snapped, furious, "That's not the point at all." She demanded answers. What kind of spell was that anyway? And why on earth did Mars stay so freakin' calm when it hit? Lloyd froze in confusion. Did his magic just break? The boy shrugged like, "It's magic." But the girl exploded, screaming, "Cheater," and insisting it was impossible, then hit him again with, "And you're an introvert too." An hour flew by and she rushed up to him with an apology, then admitted explosive magic blew her mind and yeah, she's a mage too. The boy blurts out, "It's so obvious she's got a stick," and the girl snaps back, furious, "So now all old people with sticks are magicians." The boy shot back, "That time turns everyone old eventually," and Lloyd immediately scolded him in his head, "Talk about rude." Suddenly, the girl dropped into a deep bow and begged Lloyd to teach her magic. Then panic hit him hard because he wasn't even a true master yet, but she wouldn't back down, calling him sensei and pushing her desperate plea for lessons. Lloyd's blood went cold because for the first time ever someone looked him dead in the face and called him the master, along with the worst label of all, Ruby's worthless childhood friend. He went silent, completely stunned, because the girl admitted with total sincerity that she's dreaming of one day making magic just like him. Lloyd threw down the rules he'd teach her if she answered a few questions. She lit up like crazy, and Lloyd swore he was a good guy who never lies. Then the skeptical jerk shot back, "Only liars say that." The girl shot out another apology for being rude, and the boy called it out. She was somehow mixing respect with insults at the same time. Lloyd leaned in and gently stroked her head, calming the storm. He told her youth is all about messing up, but he's begging for one thing: use magic wisely, and when she heard it, she broke down in tears. She bowed and called him sensei, then swore, stone-cold serious, that she'd even back him up as his guarantor at the bank. Lloyd's face drained of color. He wanted zero debts, zero guarantees, yet the girl wouldn't back down. She demanded the whole truth about her sensei, looked him in the eye and pressed, "Who is he really?" Lloyd froze because what if the moment they found out, they turned on him? He asked her if she knew the alchemist Ruby, and the girl practically lit up as she confirmed it with pure excitement. In Ruby's eyes, she's the country's top alchemist, a walking legend, and her creations have completely reshaped history. Lloyd fidgeted and blurted out, "Wait, do you know my assistant's name?" Without a beat, she blurted, "Lloyd the loser, the guy with a pitiful 40% success rate," because her hatred was real. Every time Ruby botched a job, she couldn't help wishing Lloyd would finally drop dead. Then she demanded, "What's all this for?" and Lloyd just shut down, saying nothing. Through choking tears, he finally blurted it out, "Lloyd, the one she begged to kill, it was him." Silence crashed down and the girl went rigid, her eyes wide with pure shock. Lloyd muttered under his breath, "Being hated isn't the end of the world," while a guy nearby snapped that Lloyd was standing way too close. When she finally reached her destination, everything clicked. Then the truth hit hard. Lloyd had quit Ruby and shown up in Minerva to reinvent himself. She hurriedly apologized with her whole heart, and Lloyd just grinned. "It's all good, really." She blurted out that Lloyd is a mind-blowing magician. Then she demanded he stop doubting himself and start believing. His chest warmed up. Those words sparked a real little burst of happiness, and for the first time it felt like this might be the start of something truly good. With a spark of inspiration, the girl pitched a total makeover: fur coat, mohawk, and a spiked bracelet, and Lloyd caught himself in his own head like, "Whoa, hold on, don't quit." 3 weeks after tearing out of the capital, Lloyd finally hit Minerva, a city buzzing with life in the southern light, and with Ruby gone, he swore he'd live easy, free from humiliation and all that crushing stress. "Right here is where my second life kicks off," he thought, hope blazing in his chest. But he had no idea that tonight was about to flip his whole world upside down. A deafening blast tore the silence apart as streams of blinding energy wrecked the buildings, and right in front of him stood a woman staring back with pure, unstoppable determination. She declared that evil was done for right here, right now. Lloyd froze in shock. It was his first day in Minerva, so would his second life get cut short before it even started? Just a few hours back, he was staring in awe at Minerva, the breathtaking city that had become the pulse of the southern light region. That carriage ride stretched for 3 brutal weeks, but when they finally arrived, a thriving city sprawled ahead of him, alive and buzzing. While Mars said the whole economy is powered by adventurer guilds, Lyra insisted that's the real engine behind every bit of financial growth, and Lloyd, shocked, blurts out, "Wait, so are we adventurers too?" Mars beckoned him to jump in without thinking twice, but Lloyd refused with a polite shake of his head. He believed he didn't deserve the spotlight. Lyra cut right in, dead serious, insisting the exact opposite: he was born for this. She broke it down like this: adventurers roam, clash with monsters, hunt rare materials, and dive deep into dungeons. So it's basically like being a mage's assistant, right? Lloyd couldn't deny it. Yeah, it felt way too familiar. Lyra, still glowing with confidence, pitched the idea of talking about his future over lunch, and Lloyd just stared like, "Wait, food again?" Lyra's voice went dead serious as she swore that dazzling Lyra and her loyal Mars would help Lloyd kick off his second life. And right then, Lloyd felt it. Someone was finally talking to him straight, no judgment, no walls between them. It hit like a ray of light. Lyra even teased him not to turn it into a tragedy, then she went right back to her food. She pressed, "Why are you acting so stingy?" Lloyd shot back that he'd already eaten on the way, and Lyra snapped that if he kept this up he'd be stuck in his old life forever. Then Mars cut in, "What are you even talking about?" Lyra lifted her popular drink and blurted, "Tapioca tea is a total hit at Minerva, 10 out of 10. But Mars only sighed and insisted they should focus on the food. Then Lyra shoved a sheet of paper into Lloyd's hands and told him to scribble the job he wanted. He blushed hard, still nodded, and sat there staring at the blank page as his thoughts scattered. Voices from the past crashed through his skull: orders, humiliations, furious shouts. "Bring this, you're trash, where's the tea?" Lloyd just stared, unable to think of a thing. Mars stayed cool and said it might be time to face the truth. Maybe Lloyd already gave up on his dreams for Ruby. Then Lyra cut in, sharp and certain, maybe the real work for him is still waiting right ahead. Awkward as heck, Lloyd still shoved the paperwork into place, and when Lyra read it out loud the room went dead silent, because it spelled out his nightmare. Second life wish list: no adventuring, Ruby will find me, no dungeons. No school, no laboratories, magic, yes, but not as some mercenary, and I don't like the smell of blood. Mars clocked that loser Lloyd was thinking way too much about himself, and Lyra just let out a tired sigh. His excuses were so bleak they sucked the joy right out of the air, but then she fired back with an idea. What if a tool store was the move? Since he knows materials inside and out, it didn't sound half bad, so Lloyd couldn't help but wonder, could this actually work? Then bam, he pictures Ruby walking into the store and she locks eyes with him. "What are you doing here?" His face drains of color as he blurts her name, Ruby. She spits out demands for the ingredients, acting like she's owed them for free, and Lloyd's stomach drops. He pictures himself sweating, blanking on what to say, terrified all over again. Lyra tried again, "Maybe I should become a carpenter." And Lloyd instantly pictured himself driving out with a fresh roof, handing it over and grilling the client, "So, is everything perfect?" But when the client steps up, it's Ruby, and she starts playing judge, smirking as she tears the work apart, saying it's all terrible and ordering a full rebuild. Crushed, he can only imagine himself apologizing again and bowing to her. Mars shot his hand out toward him, like, "Come on," Adventure's already calling his name, and with him beside Mars they'll smash through anything. Lyra shot back, "Don't be scared of Ruby, because letting her stand between you and your dream would be a loss before the story even starts. Ruby finding him here is basically a joke, and even if she does show up, it's only Lloyd who gets to decide whether he comes back. If he dares to take the adventurer's path, he won't be alone because they're right there nearby." Mars urges him to try again, and Lloyd, shaken to the core, nearly breaks down and asked, "So the question is, can he really become an adventurer too?" Mars shot back, no hesitation, "Absolutely." Lloyd shut his eyes, tossed the past aside, and then burst out with fresh power. "Fear of Ruby doesn't control me anymore. From this moment on, he's the new Lloyd, and he's itching to start the next big attempt because the adventurer's road is now his calling." Later, while they strolled through the streets, Lloyd beamed, no fear of anyone, just pure peace under his feet. Lyra teased that his praise sounded a little bleak, and Mars nodded like, yeah, this was a massive step forward. Lyra suddenly froze in place and jabbed her finger at a bronze statue of a weird old woman. Wide-eyed, Lloyd quickly stepped in and said, "That's the saint from the Emerald Church, a woman who once heard the voice of the gods." Lloyd warned them that in the neighboring kingdom, calling this saint old lady could get you executed, and Lyra shuddered because, yeah, it sounded creepy as hell. Mars even pointed out that Lloyd clearly knew his religion. Then Lloyd waved goodbye and promised, "We'll meet tomorrow at the guild," and Lyra froze. Wasn't the plan supposed to be the inn? He shot back that he was starving and ready to train for a bit, just to gear up for his big debut as an adventurer. Then Lyra stayed quiet, watching him walk out into the night. She figured Lloyd was starting to run a little too wild. Then Mars grinned and basically said, "Good, it's about time you came alive." Meanwhile, across the city, something else is already heating up. A pack of rough thugs closed in on Lloyd, and the biggest one swaggered up, flat out saying they were broke, like robbery was the obvious next step. Lloyd's nerves exploded as he stammered, mumbling that this wasn't how his brand new life was supposed to kick off, and the thug just stared like he had no idea what he was even talking about. But before everything, a brutal burst of magic ripped through the air, icy spears crashed down from the sky, and Lloyd went rigid on the spot. Right between him and the bandits, a girl materialized and shouted for them to stop their evil and surrender right now. Lloyd gaped at her in pure shock, stunned by the sheer force of her magic, yet the attackers didn't back off at all. They charged in with malicious intent, pressing her to admit she really planned to fight. She shot back with total confidence because that was the only escape. Lloyd stared hard and then it hit him, one more spell like that was coming. He froze the whole city cold, then snapped into physical enhancement mode and slammed a devastating punch into one of the attackers. Then he snapped his gaze to the girl and warned her that the ice spear was brutal power with a deadly price, so in this city, stick to simple magic. He shoved the staff into her hands and the girl just blinked, confused, and apologized. Lloyd leaned in and told her, "Don't apologize, you didn't do anything wrong, you saved me." She thanked him in a hushed voice and then he stared at her clothes, the priestess getup. "Yeah, but that power was unreal. So who are you?" he demanded. Her thoughts got cut short the second she spotted the slash on his cheek. Lloyd tried to wave it off as nothing, just a scratch, but she stepped in and cupped his face in her hands. "Don't move," she breathed, already pouring healing into the air because she was a master at it. Lloyd instantly went red. That kind of close contact was straight up unusual for him, even compared to Ruby. He caught his blush and pressed him for answers. Then she flashed a smile and said, "I'm Iris," and Lloyd, still stunned, blurts out his own name. She asks again and he only nods. He thanks her and asks if she lives here and she tells him, "No, I just got here." Lloyd freezes because he realizes she means she arrived today too. Iris beamed with such real, radiant warmth that Lloyd froze mid-breath. Then she asked what he did for a living and he shot back, "An adventurer." Iris blurted out that only a mage this strong could be that powerful, and Lloyd awkwardly tried to shrug off the praise before asking who she even was. Then Iris admitted she's currently unemployed. He froze in shock, then realized, yeah, in this they're basically the same. He leaned in and demanded why she'd come to Minerva and she just smiled. She wanted to try tapioca tea. Lloyd jumped at the chance and offered to take her to a great shop and Iris lit up, begging him to bring her there. She suddenly froze mid-step, staring at the clock and snapped, "It's already late, my escort's waiting at the entrance." Lloyd silently clocked it. She acted just like a princess out of an old fairy tale, and then with a grin he said, "Princess Iris, don't leave me alone in the dark." Out of nowhere, Ruby's voice slammed through his head. "You're a loser, straight-up trash." Iris, sweet as can be, giggled and played along. She swallowed her pride, apologized for her selfishness, and then looked at him like it was fate. "Prince Lloyd." His cheeks flared red because he never saw that coming. She blurted out a favor and Lloyd snapped to yes without hesitation. Then Iris looked up and asked if he'd help her get back to the inn, making him freeze like, wait, did she really just get lost? Meanwhile, Lyra and Mars huddled nearby, watching everything unfold. Lyra admitted she tailed Lloyd out of worry, but now it had turned into pure, non-stop excitement. She blurted out, thrilled, "Whoa, a real love triangle is happening." And when Mars tried to yank her back to reality, he basically told her she'd been daydreaming way too much. Lyra practically burst with excitement, picturing Iris sending Lloyd a love confession by letter. This was the moment. Then Mars let out a heavy sigh like, yeah, she's definitely swallowed one too many bizarre novels. Mars stepped in and offered to drive them himself. But Lyra, drowning in romantic fantasies, snapped that if he messes anything up, she'll have him getting an arrow planted straight through his head. She loosed an arrow and wham, it slammed into the building. "The gods are with me," she cheered, but when Mars caught up in shock, he realized the arrow had struck the Adventurers Guild. Lyra grinned and read her favorite romantic line, "Real happiness blooms when two souls with the same scars find love," then laughed that she was basically a bright elf Cupid, doing just a tiny bit of matchmaking while Mars stayed quiet but silently sent Lloyd all the luck in the world. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Iris were chatting like old friends and he couldn't believe she was lost, until Iris went bright red and begged him to stop saying it out loud. Then just like that, Lloyd's eyes snapped to the Adventurers Guild. Maybe these folks could point them back to the road. They pushed inside and got hit with hostile stares. Several men glared like wild dogs, furious and ready to pounce. One of them blurted out in a fury, demanding who dared desecrate Saint Sami's portrait, while Lloyd, completely lost, shot back, "What are you talking about?" Another guy jabbed a finger at him and shouted that he was blocking the kingdom's best alchemist. It's Lloyd, the loser. Lloyd's stomach dropped. How in the world did they know him? Had they spotted him back in the capital? His face drained of color and even Iris would have seen how pathetic he looked. Then the men started shouting that he'd run from the guild and attacked it. Tensions snapped into full chaos. Lloyd forced himself to breathe and decide fast because he had to act and keep anyone from getting hurt. He threw a spell into the air and unleashed pure magical chaos on the attackers. The men screamed in pure panic. No matter how hard they swung, they couldn't slice through the magic, and the power they relied on just wouldn't work. One shrieked that something was crawling inside him, the other gasped for help, and Lloyd's blood went cold when he realized, horrified, that his creation had turned into something truly terrifying. The hall rang with screams of pain and pure confusion. One of the men scrambled to explain to the leader, but Lloyd cut him off fast, fighting to prove they weren't guilty. Then, out of nowhere, Iris snapped her eyes up. Then he blared the name like a death warrant, Sold. Lloyd gasped and asked if she knew this woman, then Iris snapped, Sold used to be my personal bodyguard. Lloyd almost choked out, a bodyguard? Meanwhile, up on the roof, Sold stared at all the chaos below, utterly stunned she was seeing this unfold. Her eyes locked onto Iris and a breathy gasp ripped out of her. Holy Roland, Iris Elzer Belchortsama. She dropped to her knees and every adventurer rushed in after her, every single one. The apologies that spilled out were real, heartfelt, and heavy with meaning. They confessed they never realized Saint Iris of the kingdom of Saint Roland was standing right there, and shame hit them hard for how rude they'd been. Their apologies came out stiff, formal, and dripping with pure respect. Iris softly told them to lift their heads, then admitted the truth. She usually hides behind a mask, so of course nobody recognized her. Lloyd stepped aside and watched, convinced this kind of submission was either true, jaw-dropping respect or a direct order from the guildmaster. Everyone bowed their heads, but one guy muttered, demanding what on earth was so extraordinary about that holiness. Right away, someone snapped, "Are you kidding me? She's the most important person in the whole world." Terrified, the first guy hurried out an apology, then he stammered that the saint carries the power of the holy law and she's born only once every generation. This force breathes life back into the land, turning it fertile again until it disappears and demons crawl in to take over. The man went stone still because something felt terribly wrong. Lloyd jerked his gaze over. Yep, that mouth was still gagged in vines, and man, he should have cut them sooner. He remembered the rule. In every country, only one saint is born each generation, and she's treated like a national treasure. And right then, Iris casually but bluntly admitted she was unemployed. Unease crawled inside Lloyd's chest while the commander snapped her head toward the culprits. Her eyes blazed with fury, and she ruthlessly dropped them straight down to rank E. Panic snapped into existence the second it hit. She lunged forward, and the men bolted in a full sprint as Iris screamed, "Wait." She pleaded for mercy, "Don't punish them," but then she snapped the truth like it burned. She's no saint anymore. The woman jerked to a stop mid-step, stunned, and her eyes locked on Iris. She couldn't wrap her head around what she'd just heard. She shot back, What happened?" Iris stayed calm and said, "My spot's already gone, it's all decided." Lloyd right there froze. Wait, she's no longer a saint? He just couldn't wrap his head around it. But fear clawed at him. If Iris spilled the truth to those fanatics, everything could spiral out of control. A crushing silence slammed down, and then, suddenly, one of the men snapped and burst into tears. He blurted, "Look, there she is, the real saint, kind, humble, the whole deal," and everyone else started tearing up too, drowning in awe while Lloyd just stared back at them like, "Wait, what?" Iris spoke to Mrs. Sold in a soft, steady voice, then tears rolled down her face as she pleaded, "If you'd forgiven us yourself, I wouldn't have had to punish you, but please, promise me you'll never lie to me again." Iris spoke with real conviction and the whole crowd exploded. Long live the saint. Lloyd just stood there frozen, feeling that terrifying, fanatical love crash over him. Later they burst out of the guild already, stepping into the open. Iris tilted her head to the sky and declared a brand new day had arrived, then told them to turn onto the next street. Lloyd stared, stunned at how fast everything had vanished, silently thanking fate Iris was with him because without her this could have gone horribly wrong. Out of nowhere, he apologized. Then she paid the price for his reputation, and Iris cringed with embarrassment, thinking it was all her fault until she realized she'd just gotten lost. Still, she forced a genuine smile and told him she honestly loved spending time with him. She admitted she had no clue what to do, so she just drifted through the city streets, and tonight became her very first memory as plain old Iris, no apologies, no excuses. Lloyd went dead quiet, drinking in every word, because he knew better than anyone what it felt like to have no real home to return to. Iris had lived like a saint her whole life, always shut away, always weighed down by duty, and that kind of loneliness hit him too hard because he'd felt it before. Iris shot him a worried look, asking if he was okay, and Lloyd gave a firm nod, thanking her for everything. She just grinned and said it wasn't a big deal, then suddenly winked at him like she was up to something. She teased that his official tone made her feel like something bigger was coming. Then she leaned in and purred, "Prince Lloyd," and Lloyd's face instantly flushed red. He scanned the room with pure dread, hunting for anything to break the tension. Then his eyes snapped to the clock tower. Jackpot. He dragged Iris over and she said yes instantly, no questions asked. Lloyd didn't hesitate, he scooped her up, fired the enhancement magic and sprang upward. Iris shrieked as they blasted to the top of the tower. Lloyd blurted out an anxious apology, but Iris snapped back to calm in seconds and dove headfirst into pure excitement. Her eyes lit up, blazing with wonder at the breathtaking world unfolding in front of them. They watched the city sink into the night sky's shadow, wordless. Then Iris leaned in and breathed, "Everything looks so beautiful from up here." Lloyd blinked, shocked, and snapped, "Careful, Iris." He swore the tower was crafted by the legendary jeweler Hecate, and during his hunt for magical materials, he once found real peace by staring at the whole city from the mountains. Day and night he chased resources with everything he had, yet somehow this landscape still gave him peace, and it was just as special to Lloyd. Iris flashed him a warm smile and thanked him, and Lloyd urged her not to look away, because something incredible was about to kick off as the sun finally started to rise. Those rays kissed the tower's magical crystals and the whole place erupted in brilliant light. Lloyd leaned in, tapping the sparkle, and grinned, "Nice, isn't it?" He finally confessed it. He'd spent his whole life as just an assistant mage, worn out and hollow, so he ran straight to Minerva, and deep down he knew the truth: he wasn't special at all. But somehow he still gets to share this favorite view with someone who truly matters. Iris flashed a warm smile at him, and you could feel the respect in her eyes. She said that this world was so beautiful it made her ache, and she wanted nothing more than to finally find her place in it. Lloyd greeted her with that same heartfelt grin, and Iris slipped her fingers into his hand. Then Lloyd's face flushed even harder, totally stunned. Suddenly, Iris' expression snapped into something intense. She said his name, clutched him tight, and crushed him into a fierce hug. Her breath came in ragged gasps, like the fight had her cornered. She snapped, "Were you really planning to jump off that tower? Hope or total despair?" Lloyd shot back, "No," because he wasn't doing it for drama, he just wanted to live up to her expectations. Iris went quiet for one heartbeat, then exploded into laughter, and Lloyd just stared at her, completely baffled. She burst into laughter and said, "Lloyd is seriously one of the strangest people I've ever met, and yet, somehow he's already blown past every single expectation." Then Lloyd leaned in and asked how she pictured her new life. Iris fell silent, then softly said, "Maybe she just wants calm, happy days with a brand new friend," and Lloyd echoed, "Peaceful." It felt like I was tasting that word for the very first time. Then, just up the way, Lyra was beaming with pure joy from her hiding spot. "Everything's going exactly as planned." She burst out, turning toward Mars like, "This is it, the victory of Cupid's bow." Her moment of victory got yanked away the second she locked eyes with Ms. Sold and her crew's icy stare. Meanwhile, Mars was already in custody. Sold leaned in and demanded, in a chilling voice, which story they meant, and Lyra's face went ghost-white, like every drop of color and courage had just fled her. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Ruby's atelier, Chaos Brute, is kicking up trouble again, only this time it's not magic chaos, it's paperwork chaos. Ruby blew up, she shrieked in pure rage, convinced it couldn't be real. Then the administration guy stayed cool and flatly said her studio hadn't fulfilled orders for an entire week. She begged for one last second, calling it an emergency and insisting they wait for her assistant to return, but the inspector wouldn't budge. The rating would drop to OB. Ruby went utterly still, like lightning had just hit her. She yelled after him to wait, but he wouldn't stop. Panic surged through her mind because this rating is really customer trust, and if it tanks, her whole reputation gets obliterated. Rage was boiling inside her, every bit of it was Lloyd's fault. That total idiot vanished for 3 whole weeks. The rest of the team bolted too, they swore they'd help, then vanished on weak, pathetic excuses. Rage exploded in her, she slammed the mailbox and screamed, and the envious crowd tried to hold her back. No professional dignity at all. She panted with fury, spitting the words again, "It's Lloyd's fault." Even with rage cracking through her, she swore she'd climb into the Chronicle Alchemist ranks just like the legendary Hecate. Lloyd didn't matter, if she fell someone else would step in. But right now, she didn't have time, she urgently needed a brand new mage assistant. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Lloyd kept shooting nervous looks at the door. Today was the day he had to officially register as an adventurer, but the people he was waiting on still hadn't shown up. That only cranked everyone's nerves to max. Then Isolde burst in, hauling the battered Lyra and Mars along with her. Lloyd sprinted toward them, horrified by what he saw. Isolde stayed cool as ice and calmly said something wild had happened. She'd just run an interrogation. Then she asked Lloyd if they were his companions. Lloyd stared at them and one thought hit him hard: what did they do to them? Isolde's eyes sharpened like a blade. She called Lloyd by name and told him she'd heard rumors about him, then pushed closer, desperate to find out firsthand why he'd shown up here. Lloyd's grip tightened, sweat breaking out as the interrogation turned ice cold. This isn't some friendly chat, so what's really happening here? Earlier that day, in a shadowy interrogation room, Mars sat shoulder to shoulder with a trembling, silent Lyra. Helena pressed, "Why won't you talk?" And Isolde snapped in. She'd thrown a silence spell and she wanted none of that dramatic panic during the interrogation. She wheeled toward Mars, calm on the outside but crackling with tension, and fired straight back, demanding to know why they hit the guild. Was this twisted religious madness, or were hidden spies from some other country pulling the strings? Lyra froze in terror, because if Mars says she only wanted to be a cupid, everyone will think she's gone completely crazy. She shot him a silent message in her head: "Tell them it was bandits. The arrow hit the guild by accident. Please." Mars gave a quick nod like he already got it. She exhaled in relief right up until he opened his mouth. "And he told everyone Lyra wanted to become the cupid of love." Lyra snapped her head away and froze solid. Inside her mind she screamed, "No, he understood nothing." Isolde blinked hard, stunned by what he'd just heard. "Is Cupid love?" She pressed again, and Mars kept going, saying Lyra took inspiration from a letter of isolation to the awkward Prince Asterisk, while she swore love was the one fix for every problem. Lyra's cheeks flared red and she felt humiliation scream in her chest. But Mars didn't slow down, even helping her, like he was begging her to trust the truth would fix it all. And wasn't that exactly what she wanted to say? No. Lyra's scream tore through her mind. She felt humiliated to the bone because Mars was already seconds away from saying the name of that clumsy prince. Lyra snapped her hand across his face, and at the same time her inner scream hit maximum volume. "Stop! This is nothing like what I want." She refused to let the whole world get a glimpse of her private tastes. Back in the present, Lloyd's stomach dropped. Seeing them like that made him shudder. What kind of interrogation was this? Isolde answered with a steady calm. This time she'd close her eyes. But as punishment, Lyra and Mars had to smash through quests for free 3 times a week for a whole month. But beneath that calm mask, her mind was working overtime, because in just half a day those two had already cut down several A-rank adventurers. Then Lloyd, the same worthless assistant from the capital, somehow showed up out of nowhere, and by evening the holy Iris herself stepped into the scene. And just like that, the guild got smashed. Turns out it was a total accident, but the same people were behind it, and every single twist in the chaos somehow traces right back to Lloyd. Isolde's instincts blared, "Something's off. Lloyd isn't who he claims to be. And if Lloyd really turns out to be a danger to Minerva, she'll demand he be kicked out on the spot, no second thoughts." Isolde leaned in, eyes narrowing hard as she studied Lloyd's face like it held a secret. Did I force him to drop his real intentions? She wondered. Just then Mars suddenly cut in and demanded, "So, has Lloyd already become an adventurer?" Lloyd nearly collapsed from that question. He jerked back, drenched in cold sweat, stammering nonstop that it wasn't true, his whole body rattling under the crushing pressure. But Isolde refused to let his anxiety steer the wheel. She told him, cool as ice, that the guild was always hunting for fresh faces, and a nasty rumble churned in Lloyd's chest. The trial was finally starting. Isolde blurted that they were sprinting straight for the trials. Lloyd had to press his hand to the crystal of trials, because that's how every newcomer earns a spot in the guild, and as Lloyd spun to Lyra, he demanded what it was. She smirked and said it's a magical relic that judges your strength through touch. She said it with pride. This crystal doesn't just tell fortunes, it chooses your vocation, reads your personality, measures compatibility, and even predicts what's coming next. Lloyd froze, but then something hit him even harder. So it's a calling. Maybe that crystal will finally spill the truth about who he's meant to be, and he won't have to end up an adventurer after all. Nadia lit up in his eyes. He agreed on the spot. Lyra pushed the same instinct full force, and as Isolde watched, he couldn't shake the thought. Maybe that crystal would finally expose who he really is. They finally reached the Temple of Winds, an ancient dungeon sitting an hour's march from Minerva. And Isolde leaned in to tell them the crystal was locked away on the upper floor, meaning they'd have to blast through a gauntlet of monsters just to get it. Lloyd's eyes lit up, so he asked if Isolde had touched the crystal herself and what it flashed back to her. She snapped it off cold, saying it was none of his business, but then Lloyd went rigid, then bolted down the stairs. Something squirmed beneath him, black spiders and beetles crawling everywhere, and Lyra snapped, worried that maybe other adventurers were trapped and under attack. Right then, one of the spiders got blasted out of existence. Boom, and a booming voice screamed, "Everyone run now," because Class B adventurers had just stepped onto the stage. Lyra was seconds away from playing the hero when a spider shot up in her face, and she screamed and bolted in pure panic. Meanwhile, Isolde leaned toward Lloyd, grilling him, "Do you even know what the guild's main goal is?" She flicked her blade and unleashed wind magic, shredding every enemy in her path, and when she spoke it was pure fire. "The guild exists to wipe out every threat." Lloyd stared in disbelief because wow, she's a magical swordswoman. Right when he couldn't catch his breath, a spider dropped out of nowhere from the ceiling. So Lloyd immediately surged his strength and snapped out of the way before it could hit. Lyra ripped out a warning, and Lloyd instantly blasted a lightning bolt that atomized the spider. Isolde watched like he couldn't blink. Every move landed with purpose, zero wasted motion, no sign of weakness at all. After Lloyd won against the beetle, he spoke it out loud. "Even if he's weak, beetles still pay in materials and spiders keep them busy." And that's when Isolde's doubts hit hard. What if those rumors about Lloyd being useless were just lies? She pressed her question hard. What if he runs into something tougher? What then? Lloyd's voice turned deadly calm. "I'll unleash 16 magical blasts, smoke it with blindness, and get out." Then, right on cue, 16 brutal real explosions erupted from the sky. Isolde went speechless. 16? That was already a top-tier spell, and even if he was playing it up, that kind of power was scary as hell, and something about him felt weirdly off. She called for a quick break, and the second Lloyd spotted the tea, he lit up like a kid offered candy. No way he was turning that down. Lyra stood tall and proclaimed she was descended from elven nobility, because of course she always has tea. Lloyd then muttered a little joke, and suddenly insisted he felt just like a plain old commoner. Isolde shoved the food into his hands, and Lloyd's eyes went wide. Wait, did she just make this? Her voice snapped almost dangerously. "Any complaints?" Lyra shot back, "No." Lloyd thanked her, then dove right back into his food. Both of their expressions flipped instantly. This food tasted insanely good, and their eyes lit up with pure, happy excitement. Lloyd couldn't believe it. This was the first time he'd ever tasted a home-cooked meal in the dungeon. Lyra's jaw dropped because the same woman who wielded a sword and magic could also cook like a master, and Isolde only let out a small, knowing smile. She smirked, "Of course I can," because she's the only daughter of Lord Minerva and she had to grind through countless skills just to protect the family's honor. So when Lyra heard that, her jaw dropped. Wait, she's noble too? Isolde shrugged it off and said she didn't want or need any special treatment at all. Lloyd didn't waste a second. He demanded to know if the crystal had finally proven her years of training, but she dodged the question and shot to her feet like a signal just went off. It was time to move on. She tiptoed higher in silence, and as they climbed, Lyra leaned into Lloyd and hissed, "I've got a bad feeling Isolde is hiding her results. Don't you want to know what she's covering?" After a long pause, Lloyd finally said, "Everyone's hiding something they don't want to show, including me." But deep down, he still couldn't let it go. He had to know how that crystal picks the real calling. Lyra sat there in dead silence, and then, like a spark catching fire, she blurted out, "I've got a request." Before they knew it, they burst onto the Temple of Wind's top floor. Right there, waiting in front of them, was a mysterious crystal of trials. Isolde stepped up, held out the crystal, and told her the rule: grip it in your hands, ask your question out loud, and it answers you right then and there. She tested it by asking about her own abilities, and the crystal flashed back, masterful magic and a sword. And it stamped her status with a single deadly label, Adventurer Rank S. She waved it off like it was nothing, and Lloyd just stared, jaw dropped, shocked that the crystal could understand human words so perfectly, until Lyra snapped, "So what's the real calling of Isolde?" And before anyone could even breathe, she screamed, "Stop." But the crystal didn't wait, it answered instantly. Isolde's top 3 callings lit up. First, a martial arts master. Lloyd gasped, blown away by how the system ranked him, while Isolde panicked and pleaded with the crystal to shut down. "Stop, be quiet, stop," she screamed, yet the second one was already a holy knight, and then the final blow ripped through the air. The third calling, a baker, and then the world goes dead quiet. Isolde's face flared crimson, and humiliation hit her like a punch the second it happened. The whole place went dead silent, no movement, not a single breath, just thick tension and a crushing wave of shame hanging in the air. In total despair, Lloyd scrambled for a lifeline and blurted, "Well, I also love sweets," but the silence only kept crushing down. Then, roar, a griffin exploded into the hall and slammed into its victim without a single warning. As his wings ripped the air, a furious storm erupted, then Mars, fresh off his arrival, let out a full-throated scream of shock. Lloyd snapped rigid, stared that monster down and blurted, "I thought it was only a decoration." He barked at everyone to stay sharp. Right in the chaos, the crystal slipped from his grip, but a griffin snapped it up in its beak. And just like that, something surged forward and swallowed it whole, then it snapped its wings wide and flapped hard. And shot up into the heavens, vanishing in a blink. Lloyd froze in place, arms stretched wide, screaming, "Wait, my calling." They tore through the ancient temple corridors, chasing each other with pure urgency. Lloyd sprinted ahead, eyes locked on the horizon. He fired a lightning bolt straight at the griffin's target to end it fast. But the griffin dodged like a pro. Lyra gasped, because she never saw him escaping the magic coming, while Lloyd clenched his focus and blasted another thunder spell into the air. A brutal, earth-shaking explosion ripped through everything around them. Lyra snapped, panicking, and demanded why he was trying to wreck the tower. Lloyd quickly apologized, saying he never expected power like that, while Mars scanned the area, stunned that a griffin this high-ranking was even here, and then Isolde cut him off, "No questions right now. First, we take that beast down before anyone gets hurt." They all snapped in unison, and then they bolted right back into the chase. Isolde was yelling as she tried to find her bearings in the maze, warning them that if they veered off the main path, they'd be swallowed by the dark. Mars then snapped after the griffin, screaming that it was a coward. Lyra fired back with a sarcastic jab, "Too bad the griffin can't hear insults." Suddenly, Mars blurted, "Hey, what's his favorite food?" And the whole group snapped their heads to him in pure shock. Then the crystal's voice answered. "Fluffy pancakes?" Mars shot his finger toward the path, and everyone froze when they realized the crystal was still answering him. Lloyd blurted, "So the crystal can answer even if you don't touch it?" And Isolde shot back, "Yeah, as long as there's been contact." Lloyd didn't waste a second, he snapped, "Then what's your power, Isolde?" But the crystal stayed stone-cold quiet, and Isolde snapped that the same question never gets asked twice. Lloyd just couldn't wrap his head around it. Those compliments weren't meant to be doubted, they had to be treasured. Baffled, Isolde snapped her gaze elsewhere. "Just focus on the rescue," she said, because she honestly had no idea what else to say. Lloyd stared at her, caught off guard by the sheer shock on her face, so genuine, so sudden, it blew him away. She spun back to the crystal. "Tell me, what magic does Isolde master the most?" "Wind magic." Mars leaned in and fired again. "What's her favorite animal?" "A rabbit." Isolde gritted her teeth, shut her eyes tight. Lyra leaned in, buzzing with curiosity about her favorite book. Turns out it was a romance novel, and Lyra froze, staring like she'd just seen magic, while Isolde muttered, "Don't look at me like that." But Lyra wouldn't slow down. "And your favorite genre?" she asked. "A love story that breaks every boundary," came the reply. Then Isolde absolutely snapped, "Why are you even asking this?" Lyra pushed on, "And your favorite couple?" Isolde's patience finally hit zero. Meanwhile, Lloyd clocked the tempo and knew it was dragging, so he snapped on an acceleration spell and the whole group surged forward in a sudden rush. Isolde stared in shock, only to realize it was nothing but a hard surge of his body. Lyra couldn't take the sudden jolt, gasped, snapped that she couldn't turn, and teetered like she was about to crash down. Mars shoved her out of the way at the last second, and that split-second save kept her from hitting the ground. Then he barked at her to be more careful. As he crashed to the ground, he swore he'd keep protecting her, no matter what it cost, even if it meant his life, and Lyra screamed his name. Then Isolde let out a heavy sigh because one of the main fighters had just fallen out of the chase. Meanwhile, deep in another corner of the tower, a battered man finally snapped and admitted he'd hit his breaking point. His partner snapped at him, "None of that attitude fits a future adventurer," and the third one pushed him on, saying they were right near the top. Then the last one reminded him that Lloyd was about to join their guild and his examiner would be the guild master herself. From failure, someone cackled because her training was pure torment and her outfit looked downright cursed. Another voice chimed in that nobody wanted anywhere near her crew, and Lloyd, he probably would have blacked out from the way she taught. Then a voice threw out a totally ridiculous question. "So what are Isolde's favorite pajamas?" Crystal answered without missing a beat, "Rabbit and moon patterns," and every man snapped their head toward the griffin, stunned. He surged into the attack, and during the chaos, Lloyd snatched the crystal right out of the scramble. Then someone behind him spotted the creature and freaked out, screaming in panic. He called Isolde Guild Master and demanded answers. She barked an evacuation order at the newcomers, and the man kept pushing. "What about the pajamas?" Isolde snapped, telling him to shut up, while Lloyd went dead focused and swore, "This time I'll kill the griffin." When he said it, the beast flinched. Lloyd launched a water balloon, but that griffin juked out of the way again. Lloyd groaned, wishing he could just drag it out of the tower, because then one clean swing would end it. Locking eyes with pure determination, Lloyd swore he'd get his hands on the crystal, while Isolde stared back, worry tightening his face as suspicion surged. She couldn't forget the old man's brutal warning. Lloyd once wrecked the kingdom's top alchemist, one people dismissed as a worthless wizard. But when she watched him for herself, it was nothing like that. Lloyd moved like a master, throwing every kind of magic with ease and reading monsters like they were old friends. But the way he couldn't stop staring at the crystal, Minerva showing up with Iris, all of it felt wrong. Then a terrifying thought swallowed her whole. What if he was hunting that crystal from the very start, using Iris, exploiting her weakness and turning her into his tool? Lyra hissed that Mars was seconds away from disaster, all because of Lloyd. Then her voice died out and she slammed a silence spell onto the griffin. Isolde snapped in shock. The spell didn't just hide them, it killed the noise too, like the world went silent, and Lyra had never pulled off anything like that before. Then she smirked darkly, remembering Lloyd was the one who taught her, because her strength isn't just power, it's applying what she learns instantly. She strode forward with fearless confidence, slipped out of sight behind the griffin, and unleashed a lightning-fast attack. The strike landed like a perfect shot, and the griffin yanked the crystal out of its beak. Lloyd blurted out in pure excitement the second he saw the crystal drop, and every single person snapped their attention to him. They charged at him like something evil had grabbed their souls. Lloyd was the first one to snatch the crystal. Lyra's smile lit up her face as behind her she crumpled to the ground, drained to the bone, and Lloyd, bursting with pure joy, clutched the crystal to his chest like it was everything. And he leaned in and whispered, begging for a calling worthy of every ounce of his hard-earned effort. Crystal snapped back. His destiny was to serve Ruby. Lloyd got taken, caught like a criminal. A servant did it. He couldn't even process the words he just heard. Flooded by memories, he could barely speak, so Ruby demanded, "Why won't you sleep?" And he confessed, "I'm studying alchemy so I can help you." But her answer hit like ice. Then she scoffed, yanked over the lamp, and scattered every note he'd been grinding over all night. His despairing cry sliced the air, but Ruby didn't even flinch. She reminded him he was her assistant master and that he had to obey, and that memory still stung. Right now, Lloyd choked out a loud denial, and his whole body shook with shame and humiliation. He refused to keep living like a joke, crushed in someone else's spotlight, and deep down, he was aching to break free for real. With a roar, he demanded to know why life wouldn't let him change, and Isolde just stared back, silent at first until her eyes softened. Lyra slowly clawed her way back to reality, whispering Lloyd's name, then her eyes snapped wide as a raging griffin dove for Lloyd, claws bared and ready to strike. Isolde snapped into the path of the strike, her sword slammed it to a stop, and she fired back at Lloyd, saying the crystal's words mean nothing, the only real choice is the one he makes. She admitted she could have baked cakes to bring in even more smiles, but she has zero regrets about choosing the path she's on. Pride lit up her face and her words sank straight into Lloyd's heart, so he nodded hard, fully committed. Isolde shot into the fight again, her blade cracking through the air, and she swore she'd make the griffin retreat from the tower so Lloyd could finish it. Lloyd nodded, totally ready to land the final strike. When Isolde collided, the beast blasted out of the tower, wings wide like a storm. She screamed at Lloyd to move, and he roared into a thunderous charge that slammed the magical strike right into the griffin, dropping it instantly. After the dust settled from the battle, the crystal was rushed back to where it belonged. As soon as everything finally settled, Isolde realized the world was back to normal. Then she admitted she'd suspected Lloyd of a conspiracy and begged him for forgiveness, leaving Lloyd completely stunned by what she said. But when she smiled and swore that this city could change and that she truly believed it, his face finally let go of that tension. He exhaled, then thanked her. Isolde spun back to the crystal and demanded one more thing. Lloyd's favorite dish, only for the crystal to answer pot au feu. To honor Lloyd's win in the adventurer's trial, Isolde lit up the idea and threw together a huge, celebratory feast. When Lloyd heard the news, he burst with pure joy and shouted in excitement. Outside the Lyra Tower, Lloyd stepped in, and the moment he appeared, the welcome hit him warm and loud. She slapped a grin on his face and congratulated him for passing the test, and Lloyd turned around with a sincere, heartfelt thank you. Isolde made it official, trials done, and announced that Lloyd can grab guild quests every week now. Lyra practically sparkled with joy as she blurted, "Is that really true?" Then she leaned in and asked Lloyd if he wanted to team up for a quest tomorrow, and Lloyd whipped around to Mars to double-check everything was fine. Mars shot back that he'd bounce back fast. Isolde swallowed hard and cleared her throat, like she was about to rip into the truth. This totally snagged their attention, and she looked embarrassed, then quickly reminded them, "Yeah, I'm the guild master, but Sundays are my off days. The kind of days where she slips out on adventures solo." She muttered she was probably getting old since she'd forgotten tomorrow was Sunday and everyone just got it. She was basically begging them to ask her to come along. Lyra caught the hint and pushed Isolde to bake a cake. She agreed on the spot. Then Lyra promised to bring her that recommended novel, but Isolde snapped back immediately and refused without blinking. Still, the company kept chatting, plotting light little adventures for tomorrow. Lloyd grinned at them, calm settling over his shoulders, and thought maybe this is where he finally stays. Lyra remembered they followed elvish teachings and asked if that was all right, and Isolde answered that welcoming other beliefs was more than okay, it was encouraged. A few days later, in a modest little house in Minerva, a cheerful voice belted out a melody, while the man practically jumped through breakfast prep, listing every ingredient with grin-filled energy. Omelette made from fresh eggs, ketchup squeezed from ripe potatoes. He also let soup steep overnight and baked homemade bread, then grinned and proudly served up the supreme-level breakfast for Iris. He froze on the spot, because it wasn't her at all. A maid stood there instead. The maid said Iris had slipped out early for training, and when the boss asked about breakfast, she explained the head maid handed her sandwiches to carry along. The cook crumpled to his knees, despair crashing down on him, because Iris waking up to breakfast was the one thing that made his whole day feel possible. And the maid quietly pointed out that after Iris arrived in Minerva, she'd changed for real, growing way more active than before. Maybe some powerful mage had a hand in it, steering everything from the shadows. The chef shot to attention, leaned in like he couldn't breathe, and begged Sapphira for more, while she chewed her food calmly, and he kept insisting she stop eating and spill every detail. Finally, Sapphira spilled that on Iris's very first night in Minerva, she slipped out of the house and ran into a guy named Lloyd. And ever since, those two have gotten wildly close. Iris looked like she was holding her breath for another meeting with him, then the boss's face snapped dark. Nero seethed that nobody told him, called it a dirty scam, and lobbed accusation after accusation at Sapphira, but she stayed icy calm and said, "You never asked." Then he demanded what Lloyd looked like, and she answered, "Black hair, tall, and an ordinary face." Nero went to Sapphire and promised he'd ride shotgun with her on the next security mission. Then he theatrically squeezed ketchup onto his omelet, drew a scary face, cut it clean, and flashed an ominous grin, because a plan was already simmering in his head. He was going to meet Lloyd face to face. A full week before the Adventurers Guild even knew what hit them, a tough woman scribbles the numbers, 40 goblins, 20 red boars, and seals the quest with a reward of 3 gold coins. Stunned by what she's seeing, she can't help but wonder how a job that normally eats up 3 days got finished in a flash. Lyra stands tall with pure pride and declares loud and clear that they're elite adventurers. But Mars realizes he's been standing aside the whole time, and before he can even start talking, Lyra shuts him down fast. Then, out of nowhere, Isolde comes marching right up to them. Lloyd snaps around and freezes in shock. Isolde is hauling a massive 4-layer cake, and she casually tells him her subordinates caught wind of her hobby, so she baked one for everyone. She turns to Lloyd and flat-out reminds him, at minimum, he needs to finish the job by himself. Caught off guard, Lloyd blurts out, "What's this about?" And Isolde shoots back that he's still stuck caring for Lyra with Mars. She just wanted to bake a cake and she did it, no questions asked. But is he really saying he can't be bothered with anything more important? Lloyd just grins right back and says, yeah, he's got other things he still wants to do. He swears that living slow is the best thing on earth. Then Isolde freezes for a beat, picturing him showing up with breakfast, peeling it, and cleaning up after everyone like it's nothing. Lyra's yelling for red boar curry for dinner, and Isolde just drops into a heavy sigh, because these two are way too wrapped up in Lloyd. She steels herself and decides Lloyd has to start taking care of himself, and the very next day, deep in the forest, Lloyd sinks into the schedule and realizes that several quests are already done. The real kicker? He finally wiped out all 100 goblins across 5 days just this morning, and now he's sprinting toward a quick lunch, then knocking out 3 more jobs before evening hits. In her mind, Ruby keeps hearing it like a rule. Healing magic wipes out the need for sleep, so if she skips resting, she'll smash through all 5 tasks. Suddenly, he clutches his head, and whatever he's doing isn't some slow, lazy life at all. Imaginary Ruby is laughing it off, but what does a peaceful life even mean for him? Lloyd can't find a single word to answer. With a wild spark in her eyes, she shoves food into his mouth and barks, "Get back to work." Sweat trickles down his forehead and suddenly Isolde's dishes flash in his mind. Then he snaps, flat out denying it because he refuses to live like that. Next, he's about to cook for himself, just POTOFA, but Ruby's imagination flips the script and he's mocking it POTOFA. For Lloyd, it was the best meal the orphanage had to offer, until Ruby swooped in and snatched his sausage every time because she'd always rather have curry. To her, potof is just leftover soup, street food for the poor, but to him, it's a dream and he vows to make it with the finest ingredients, while she scoffs at every attempt and laughs off all his hard work. And with a wild imagination roar, it screeches for curry and demands silence. Then a real blast hits, cutting thoughts in half, and Lloyd bolts straight toward the epicenter. He spots Iris sprawled on the lake's surface, utterly lifeless. Shocked out of her mind, Lloyd rushes to her side. Then Iris finally snaps back, stammers out his name, and immediately panics over how she looks. She tells him she was training near Manhwa, but the spell's power tore through the air, and the current yanked her straight here. Lloyd's stunned because that's a 2-hour carriage ride. Iris starts to spill it, then he slams the brakes, interrupting her with, "Who are you talking about?" And Iris snaps back that she meant the maids, the ones who are probably already freaking out. Lloyd tells Iris, "I'll take you back the moment the clothes dry," then grabs the moment with a grin, offering her a snack of his all-time favorite dish, and Iris can't help but blink in surprise. But the second Lloyd lifts the lid, he just freezes solid. Then Iris grins and blurts out that it's curry, her all-time favorite. Lloyd's whole body trembles, tears spill as he can't even get his favorite dish right, so he tears into himself, calling himself worthless, and Iris quietly steps in to comfort him. She snatches a spoon, takes one taste, and blurts out that it's insanely delicious. Her smile lights up the room as she tells him, straight from the heart, that his cooking is incredible. Lloyd's shoulders drop with relief, and he thanks her with every ounce of gratitude he's got. Lloyd finally confessed that curry is Ruby's absolute favorite, and when Iris blurted out in shock who Ruby even was, he leaned in and told her, Ruby is his childhood friend and a powerhouse mage. He talked with warmth about Ruby and her dream to become the kingdom's greatest alchemist, brushing himself off as just an assistant, until Iris cut him off and declared that Lloyd deserved respect, not pity. Her words hit Lloyd hard. She believed real strength meant backing people up, and even after they split, Lloyd stayed exactly that kind of person, someone who helped and who mattered. Lloyd stared at her, and right in his chest a thought flared up. What if slow, cozy days beside Iris were the real happiness? He couldn't forget the moment he bolted from Ruby, chasing peace, but it hit him in Minerva, nothing will ever change unless he changes first. He even apologized for being painfully honest, and Iris just backed him up. She added that she got stripped of her saint status too, because she simply refused to change. A heavy silence dropped between them, and Lloyd's stomach sank as he realized he barely knew a thing about her. Somewhere far off, a watcher was locked onto them, staring as everything unfolded. Nero pressed his eye to the telescope, narrowed hard, and fury surged. Then he exploded into a shout, refusing to believe what he was seeing. Rage exploded as he roared, "What kind of nonsense is Iris cooking up now, this worthless fool?" Meanwhile, Iris beamed as she chatted about the maids. Then, one time, Sophia went and devoured every last bite of the food Nero had prepared. Lloyd leaned in and listened to her, a soft smile tugging at his face as her words lit him up from the inside. He couldn't wait to hear more. Just as everything kicked off, a loud shout cut through the chaos. Iris. She spun around with pure joy and shouted, "Tararoo," and then a woman with a hard, stern stare stepped into view. Iris proudly introduced her, maid and chief chambermaid all wrapped into one, and Tararoo gave Lloyd a heartfelt thank you for everything he'd done. She claimed she'd hauled the forgotten treasures of Saphilia, but when Iris was asked about the others, a fierce blush hid her face, and she finally confessed she'd gotten completely lost. Tararu snapped at her for charging ahead like an idiot, especially after the warning about complex spells. Then Lloyd quietly thought, yeah, she really was the kind of scarecrow that falls for danger. Iris threw in an apology and swore she wants to help everyone, especially now that she's no longer a saint. Tararu shot Iris a sarcastic jab, reminding her how she froze the whole team last time. Then Iris swore this time would be different, while Lloyd watched her promise and fell for her even harder. Then he snapped his attention to Tararu and tossed out an offer. He'd teach Iris magic himself. Iris's eyes lit up and she told Lloyd he was worth 100 men. Then she eagerly agreed, while Tararu grudgingly relented as long as it was truly safe. She warned, the second danger hits, I shut it all down, no questions. Lloyd pushed for going a bit farther down the river while Nero kept staring, stunned when Tararu finally showed up. At first, he suspected Lloyd, but when all he saw was a pot and a pile of kitchen utensils, fury surged even harder. How could she swallow food like that from some self-taught cook? He wheeled on Sophia and demanded she show off the sword skills of the former holy knight, but she just kept eating, calm as ever. Nero was stunned until she said she was tasting the food for poison. She swore she'd left her sword behind, but grabbed a radish just like he asked, and Nero's rage instantly detonated because he didn't need that radish anymore. Still chewing, Saphilia's eyes widened. This curry tasted almost exactly like Nero's, so she couldn't help it. He had to taste it for himself. After one spoonful hit his tongue, he froze dead still. Every bite hit like perfection, balanced ingredients, rice cooked just right, a curry fit for an emperor, but right then a cold shadow crept in because it tasted asterisk off somehow, like something was terribly wrong. Cold dread crawled over him, telling him this dish was going to bring Iris straight up misfortune. Lloyd has to be taken out right now, I've made that call. By the Iris River, Iris leaned in and begged Lloyd to teach her the water dragon spell, because he still remembered it perfectly, the one that summons a roaring dragon made of pure water. He fired off the first instruction, start a tiny whirlpool, then crank it up little by little. Iris buzzed with excitement and called him sensei with pure joy. Then the water suddenly roared to life and boiled out of control. Iris shrieked in pure panic, and before the fear could even settle, Lloyd snapped into action, casting the water sphere spell right away. The shell blasted through the boiling, unstable water and Tararu shot him a dark look, then demanded if this was too dangerous. Lloyd stammered, all awkward nerves, insisting everything was under control. He swore he'd stay by her side until Iris finally mastered the spell, but Iris shot back with pure determination. She'd do whatever it takes to reach her goal, so Lloyd couldn't help but grin, warmth flooding his chest. His mind snapped back to the past. When did he pull off that first water dragon? He flashed back to that brutal desert, to the moment he was seconds from death. But he slammed the memory shut and swore he'd never let Iris suffer anything like that. While everyone else was busy, Nero and Saphilia watched from far away, until Nero snapped, furious, and declared it was time to run a security check downstream. He blared Lloyd's name like the end was already here, then wasted zero time. Saphilia, start! Saphilia sighed, knowing even the finest curry couldn't keep him alive. Saphilia heard the signal, and her whole body snapped into battle mode in an instant. She unleashed her signature move, the radish split. Water skyrocketed into the sky and detonated into a massive crashing wave. Lloyd snapped his head around just in time, his face staying stone calm while Iris and Tararu yelled his name, begging him to hear them. He didn't even flinch. He slammed the water dragon spell into existence, and the water churned into a massive beast while he read the whole situation in real time. Nero and Saphilia tried to hang on, but the world yanked them under, right into the lake, because that explosion hit with a force they never saw coming. Lloyd seized the moment to tell Iris how the water dragon can tame raging floods, and Iris just stood there, staring in pure awe. Rage exploded in Nero's chest as he snapped orders for Saphilia to attack, and she just froze, totally confused, because she'd already eaten a radish while Iris watched it all click into place, finally seeing exactly who those two really were. Tararu's hard voice suddenly cut through the water and she snapped at Nero for his reckless stunt, screaming for both of them to get out right now, right as a crushing, powerful rumble rolled in. A hulking fish exploded from the water and every single person went stone still. It was the Galician Legion, rare, vicious, and deadly, and the fact that it showed up right here, that was beyond unthinkable. Lloyd snapped into action. He loosed a blazing arrow straight at the fish and it struck dead on. The monster splashed back into the water, but Nero yelled, "Forget it, more are coming." Lloyd finally grasped how huge this threat really was. Those legion fish kept charging non-stop until every last one was wiped out, and even the strongest magic came with a deadly risk to everyone nearby. Iris didn't hesitate for a single breath. She bolted ahead, snapped her hands up, and fired an ice spell straight at the target. Lloyd was blown away. Most people won't even try ice magic when they're surrounded by water. That fish blasted out of the lake again, and then, right from above, a brutal wave of monsters plummeted down on Iris. Taruru barely got out a warning before she launched forward, throwing herself in front of Iris to shield her with her own body. Everyone went still, then Iris stared terrified as the fish charged straight at Taruru and her scream tore through the air. Nero and Saphilia clocked the danger and launched forward, and Nero snapped curses at the monsters, roaring that even fish wouldn't dare mock the chef, while the Legion was already gearing up for its next brutal strike. Then boom, the monster tore itself apart. Lloyd sprinted over and blurted, "Are you okay?" Nero insisted everything was fine, but the tension in the air screamed otherwise. Iris shook with terror and screamed Taruru's name again and again, staring at the wounded maid as she started getting ringed by fish, pure fear swallowing her whole. Suddenly, Iris snapped into action. She shouted the spell of the water dragon, and swirling water spiraled around her into a blazing vortex. Fire blazed in her eyes as she vowed, "No one's getting hurt, not on my watch," and she refused to stand by any longer. Taruru, barely hanging on, blinked her eyes open, while everyone watched Iris carefully steer the element with total control. She scooped Tarura up into her arms and eased her onto the ground. Then a surge of raw power hit, making Iris sway for a second. Lloyd, still reeling, blurted out that she'd done it. Her spell actually worked. All three bolted toward Taruru, and you could see the panic blazing in their eyes. Iris dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around her friend, and begged her to tell her everything was okay. Then Taruru opened her eyes and breathed, "Your magic is beautiful," and Iris smiled through the tears. Lloyd stared into the spell, remembering how he'd built it to save his own skin. Then Iris used it to shield everyone else, and her sincerity hit him like a punch. He let out a quiet smile and realized, plain and simple, she was truly extraordinary. Right then, Nero snapped his name, and when Lloyd spun around, he caught Nero's surprised gratitude for the rescue plus a full-on apology for the attack. Lloyd just froze and awkwardly nodded back. Nero shoved a package into his hands, and the second Lloyd peeked inside, he froze. The box held his signature dish, sashimi carved from Legion fish. Taruru strode up to Lloyd, bowed, and thanked him for looking after Iris, swearing he'd repay him someday. Then Lloyd mumbled it was no big deal until Nero suddenly exploded into action, sprinting straight to Iris and yelling, "Are you hurt?" Iris sprinted straight up to Lloyd and slammed into a tight hug, and Lloyd's face flared red as confusion hit. Behind them, Nero just froze like a statue. Then Iris locked eyes with him and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. In the very next heartbeat, Lloyd slipped and crashed into the water. Everyone screamed his name in terror. As he fell, the only thing on Lloyd's mind was this: thank goodness he'd agreed to teach Iris magic. As the sun dipped, they huddled together and traded memories, and Iris pointed out that the Legion fish is a rare monster, especially when you're anywhere near Minerva. She tried calling it a coincidence, but the moment it happened, that idea got shut down fast. Lloyd, all on edge, remembered the two monsters he'd already faced, the sandworm and the griffin, and Iris nodded right along. This was not normal. She warned that the temple's holy power had been drained, leaving the door wide open for strong monsters to slip inside. Then Lloyd remembered it. That griffin had shown up near the Temple of Wind. Nero pointed it out. This only made things weirder because those temples were meant to be sealed tight by the strongest holy energy, and beings like that had no business showing up there. Lloyd's mind started to race with dread. Something was going down inside the Temple of Wind, and a brutal storm was already rolling in over Minerva. Iris told me the sanctuary isn't just a building. It's a magical fortress, powered by the priestess, holy energy, that can slam a barrier down to stop even the strongest monsters, and every holy servant out there stands guard to protect the temple in her own country. That kind of monster doesn't just pop up for no reason. Something's horribly wrong with the temple, and Lloyd knew it the instant he remembered the Temple of Wind sits past the forest. Iris blinked, then shot him a surprised look, eyebrows up. They didn't waste a second, straight to the temple they went. Then Iris immediately saw it. The barrier had been smashed open. Tararu realized the others were sensing it too, and when Lloyd swept his eyes across the area, he snapped at his companions, all nerves, shouting as if something was about to happen. Lyra snapped in surprise the moment she spotted Iris, staring like she couldn't believe her eyes. Then Lloyd noticed her partner Isolde was hurt. Isolde snapped that a trio of griffins ambushed them, and even though they fought them off, Iris knew trouble wasn't done. New enemies were already closing in and the battle felt seriously bad. She leaned forward and asked if that priestess they'd met before was still around, and Isolde shook his head, confirming she was gone. Isolde said the priestess took off to investigate after griffins showed up, but she's stuck at a different temple right now. She's due back in 2 weeks, and Iris made up her mind. She's got to go down into the temple herself and carry out the purification ritual with her own hands. Lloyd blinked in shock and demanded, "What does that mean?" Tararu leaned in and said, "Cleansing is how you restore the barrier," then locked eyes with Lloyd, and demanded that he escort Iris straight into the temple's darkest depths. She even confessed she'd only slow him down if she went alone. With confidence blazing in his voice, Lloyd nods and promises to walk alongside Iris, and Tararu reassures her that if he's at her side, there's nothing to fear. While just a few steps away, Nero silently watches, brow creasing with worry. Syphilia suddenly jolts. What if the monsters here are actually edible? Lloyd remembers those many-legged beetles and how surprisingly tasty their meat is. Hearing that, the girl can't help it, drool spills and her eyes sparkle with pure, hungry anticipation. Before long, Lloyd freezes in shock as the stairs don't go up at all, they drop straight down. Iris wastes no time, saying they're headed to the temple's deepest core where the purification is about to happen. Iris shoots back a warning, "If you go deeper you'll hit the ritual hall," but the monsters have probably already slipped inside, and Nero tells everyone to stay on guard because the pressure is skyrocketing. Lloyd adds that the attack can hit from any direction, and in the thick silence, Nero whips his head toward Iris like something's gnawing at him, the kind of unease that makes his own food feel cursed with a sinister aura. He admits he can't trust his own cooking anymore, and when Syphilia laughs that his food has always been awful, Nero turns red and tries to hold onto his dignity. Iris locks eyes with Lloyd and tells him she fully believes he'll keep the whole continent at peace, and every word in her voice crackles with hope. Suddenly, danger! Lloyd spots a spider creeping behind Nero and whips out lightning, slamming it instantly so it drops and can't move, and the tension skyrockets all over again. The spider is absolutely massive and it slams straight onto Nero. Lloyd and Iris yank him out fast while Syphilia doesn't even panic. She stares at the dead thing and wonders if it's the same beetle, then immediately realizes it definitely does not look appetizing. Just as they can't even catch their breath, a giant beetle crashes into view and Lloyd instantly dubs it the Beetle King. Meanwhile, Syphilia's already halfway to dreaming about dinner. She rockets forward with zero fear, swings her sword in a sacred arc and lands a crushing strike, so powerful it leaves Lloyd totally stunned. He hears from Iris that Syphilia used to be a holy knight just like Isolde, and after the fight she can't wait to get her hands on a beetle leg. Lloyd shouts a warning, too late, it's enormous, but Syphilia just stares blankly, frozen in place, unable to say a word. And with no warning, she just drops to the ground. Everyone surges to her side. When she gasps out the truth, she can't fight anymore. Lloyd's gut tightens. She isn't defeated, she's starving. Nero watches in silence, then Lloyd throws out the idea of chopping the meat. But it's Nero who steps up, grabs a portion, and expertly makes it right. He scrapes off the slime, showers it with spices, and wipes away every trace of stink. Syphilia takes one taste, then everything clicks. Her face lights up, her eyes blaze, and it's like her whole body screams, "Let's fight again." Clutching her charge, she rockets forward with her sword up. Lloyd can't believe it, these beetles are way tastier than he thought. Then Lyra's voice snaps through the comms, total alarm. Lyra gasps that a whole horde of elite monsters is closing in fast. She shouts that they have to trigger the barrier right now, but Lloyd's stomach drops because he instantly realizes it won't last. Iris barks a sharp command, "Leave right now," and nobody dares to stall because the clock is already hunting them down. On the road, Nero digs into that amazing food, then grins and swears he won't say a word about Lloyd until the secret behind that flavor is revealed. Right after Lloyd innocently suggests they should learn it from Syphilia, Nero snaps and just grabs his head. Iris smiles as their argument erupts, then bam, Syphilia yells, "Minotaur ahead." The enemy charges in and Iris snaps her shield up like her life depends on it. Sephilia doesn't hesitate, she barrels through and cleaves the beast clean in two. Lloyd fires off an earth-shaking spell and wipes the monster out on the spot, while Nero chops up the Minotaur's meat like, yeah, dinner's officially locked in. After the fight, the whole crew tears into a piping hot meal, the tension melts away and their strength comes roaring back. Iris jabs a finger at the gates, beyond them sits the ritual hall. Lloyd gets it fast, she's chasing magic not just to stay safe but so she can battle beside her friends. Nero cracks jokes at Lloyd's naivety and Lloyd just doesn't get the hint, while Nero grins like there's a secret behind it and the whole air turns tense. Inside the sanctuary, Lloyd stares at the barriers and Iris snaps, "This is the purification spot." Then she turns to everyone and yells for them to hold the defense. But the enemy never blinks. Sephilia snaps into action and slams a stop to the storm of daggers streaking toward Iris, her blade flashing bright as it cuts through the chaos. Lloyd blurts out, shocked, "It's an attack," and then a cold, sinister laugh slithers through the hall. A masked girl spills out of the darkness and locks eyes with Iris, calling her a false saint, then lays out the plan. She's coming to capture her for a fat reward. Lloyd froze in shock. Someone had slapped a bounty on Iris's head, and even with the sting in his body, Nero still pushed through with one burning question. Could this girl really be Roland's hired assassin? She just laughed. Resistance is futile. Then Lloyd didn't hesitate. He slammed the spell down and blasted the cloaker off its feet. Everyone snapped to silence. Lloyd clenched his breath and blurted, "Wait, is this real? Is it over?" Daggers erupted out of nowhere, flashing through the air, and Nero threw himself in front of Iris, taking the hit clean on his shoulder. Then the girl reappeared again. The one that fell was only a flimsy clone. "Ugh, this cheap mannequin," she scoffed, and Lloyd's face twisted as it finally hit him. A brand new danger had just stepped into the room. While the dungeon erupted in non-stop battle, Lyra on the surface shook with pure terror. Then Mars, standing in front of the land-eater monster, snapped at her to hang on or Minerva would fall. The liar burst back with a storm of feelings. "Calm, the temple is literally crumbling, and if that beast slips in, the whole city is finished." Panic exploded across the ranks. One soldier clocked the monster and froze in fear, but Isal barreled in and snapped, "We can't leave civilians behind. Hang on, come on, Iris is tightening that barrier below us, just a little longer now." Haruru watched from afar, sick with worry as the temple crumbled to dust, while her thoughts raced beside Iris. Down in the dungeon, the killer finally tore off her mask, and boom, it was the Black Raven, Roland's elite assassin, while Iris was just getting sold as some false saint. The clone stepped forward and introduced himself politely, and the original snapped, screaming, "Killers don't have time for etiquette." Nero just blinked, stunned as their fight ignited. Lloyd pressed Iris for answers about the barrier and she snapped back, "That crack can barely hold." Then her eyes widened as memory hit. She remembered the relic, the staff of the Holy Ruin. The clone, just being polite, instantly flashed the staff, while the real one erupted in rage. So the clone wasn't being nice at all, it was just showing off. Iris is absolutely furious. How the heck did they get the weapon that was supposed to be locked down under the harshest security? Lloyd figured it out fast. If the staff stayed standing, that hole wouldn't seal shut. Then the assassin broke. He admitted it was a trap built to strike the moment the local saint was gone. Iris clenched her fists. So many lies. Lloyd snapped her back to her senses and a surge of fury rose up inside her. In an instant, two shadows slid up behind Iris, but Sephilia snapped in front of them and slammed the attack away, shielding her on the spot. Assassinka couldn't stop wondering how much longer Sephilia could hold on. Meanwhile, Nero clenched his teeth, because the clock was already slipping past the point of no return. Lloyd slots in the fourth shield, wrapping his friends in a protective sphere. Now he's nothing but backup support from here on out. Sephilia snapped into action. She snatched Nero by the leg, lunged forward, and screamed, "Holy cut," as she unleashed the Nero slash and sent a wave of force crashing through. Clone after clone got scattered to the winds. Then one of them shrieked, "It's an unclean monster!" And the whole pack erupted into chaos until the original barked, switched to the special technique. Thick smoke swallowed the hall. Lloyd snapped, "Smoke screen, keep your guard up." In the dead of night, the past and future illusions snapped to life, flooding the dark with impossible time. Sephilia froze because the sweet memory of her first bite slammed into her and drowned out everything else. Lloyd shouted to wake her up, but the clone smirked and said she was trapped inside her own memories. Iris felt that sickening haze yank at her soul, and when the assassin finally won, the last act slammed into motion. This spell rips open the soul's darkest cravings, so intense it makes fear feel weak. She boldly declared there's no escape from their paradise dream, and her power is absolute. Lloyd's shield split wide, cracks racing across it while Iris screamed, "It's failing, the defense is breaking." And the assassin grinned because Lloyd was right on the edge of being crushed by the weight of his own dreams. Inside his illusion, Nero pictured himself as the head chef, and Iris lit up, cheering his dream of a world where everyone gets to taste delicious food, then told him with real warmth that she'd be thrilled to work side by side with him. When Iris praised Nero's cooking, joy lit up his face like a bonfire. He practically blossomed on the spot, and her teasing joke about losing track of her duties because the food was so good left him absolutely spellbound. Lloyd froze, torn between cracking the protective spell and risking Iris's life, or leaving everything untouched, while Iris, half out of her mind, kept transforming and hurling insults at Nero, calling his culinary ego downright disgusting. Lost in his fantasy, Nero kept pushing Iris to eat, barking for more food, more beauty, until she blinked in confusion and asked what on earth was wrong with him while the assassin watched his obsession crumble into something scary. Suddenly, Nero snapped back to his senses. Just like that, the illusion exploded apart and the assassin reeled, shocked to find her own trap had turned against her. Lloyd stared in shock as the spell finally shattered, and the assassin snapped that she'd never seen a chef get wrecked like that, then clenched her teeth, because as long as Nero dodged the illusion, she could take him down without any tricks. Right then, Lloyd blurted out the wild idea, "Nero, prepare something right now." And when Nero froze in shock, he demanded if Lloyd was really pushing for that move mid-fight. Lloyd swore the real flavor would awaken Saphilia, but Nero froze because he didn't have the ingredients. Lloyd tossed him a chest packed with everything he needed, and Nero let out a heavy sigh before reluctantly nodding. If he had to do it, he'd at least give it a shot. The assassin just stared, stunned, as Lloyd and Nero cooked up curry for Omuris, while the clones jeered and called it a joke. But the moment Saphilia's eyes snapped open, even they went dead quiet. She snatched the sword, shattered the illusions in a blink, and hacked through the air like it was nothing, while the clones exploded into panic, utterly unable to accept what they'd just witnessed. The assassin shrieked in pure horror when he saw the staff of sacred destruction in Saphilia's hands. Then Lloyd shot up, grinning, yelling, "We did it." Teeth grinding, the assassin could not believe her illusions had failed to hunger. Saphilia, still chewing, finally admitted she'd walked straight into the trap. Nero just laughed and said, "See, appetite saved you." At that exact moment, Iris broke into pure joy and shouted, "The barriers finally closed." The earth monster geared up for a final, brutal strike. Then Lyra, panicking, bolted to Mars and clutched everyone with hugs, convinced this was the end, until the barrier's energy suddenly spiked and yanked hard at the monster's neck. Lyra and Mars went stiff with shock because that massive beast was finally knocked out. Then, in the dead quiet, it hit them. They'd been saved. Meanwhile, deep inside the temple, Lloyd braced himself for the assault, then realized every ally was already gone except for one last survivor who still stood. The assassin grinned at the shattered battlefield. Then Lloyd's instincts screamed when the fallen enemy started getting swallowed by some mystery force, and the assassin burst into a victorious laugh. She lunged forward at breakneck speed and her body started to morph, pulling in every clone like they were energy. Then she snapped into her new form and unleashed her technique, supersonic swordsmanship. Her movements turned invisible, then Lloyd snapped back with a spell that supercharged his body, and their powers slammed together. In the next heartbeat, he landed the strike. That crushing hit slammed the assassin into the wall and she blacked out, stunned that he'd somehow guessed her strength. Lloyd struck back with an enhancement strong enough to tear down even the deadliest monsters. Stunned, the assassin could barely get the words out. She couldn't believe she'd thrown the win away with that lead after the fight. Isolde strode forward, cuffed the defeated assassin, and hauled her into custody, then declared she'd drag her straight to the capital for trial, and with a grin to Iris, she confirmed it. They just saved the Temple of the Wind. Lloyd grabbed the captive's attention and snapped, "Black Crow." Then he demanded answers why in the world someone put a bounty on Iris. She scoffed, muttered then gave a chilling explanation. Prince Roland of the Sacred Kingdom commanded it because he saw Iris as a threat to everything he wanted. Isolde froze in shock, snapped her head toward Iris and demanded, could they really have just expelled her? Iris nodded and the conspiracy's full weight finally crashed down on Isolde. Turns out the prince wasn't just playing nice, He was hunting war with their country, and everyone froze in shock at the bombshell truth that finally came to light. Lloyd was blown away. War. Iris shot him a look and demanded he tag along to the capital because the only way to stop the invasion was to act fast, but doubt flickered across Lloyd's face. Ruby was waiting for him there. On the ride to the capital, he flipped through ancient diaries filled with her words. Prince Roland wasn't chasing peace at all, he was dreaming of starting a war. Iris told everyone that Prince Guise had been pushing for years to crush the pagan lands, because he wanted a stronger army before the war with demons finally hit. Iris stood up to Prince Guise's brutal plan, warning him that their rage would only transform them into the same demons that unleashed terror centuries ago. Because of that fight, they threw her out screaming she'd faked her holy status. Then she warned them, "Don't blink, everything is only just starting." Iris dreams of forging an alliance with other nations to stop Roland, and Isal swears she'll set up a meeting with the queen. Iris blurts out that she's worried, asking Lloyd if he's okay. He's shaking like crazy, but he swears everything's fine. As soon as Iris steps into Melzeria's capital, she's blown away by the fancy architecture towering over her and the sleek, fashion-forward people strutting through the streets. Isal tells everyone that the queen's love for elegance lit a spark in all of them, and suddenly they all dressed so exquisitely it was impossible to ignore. Inside the palace, the queen showers Isal with praise for shielding the Temple of the Wind from the Black Crow, but Isal brushes it off with humble, quiet refusal. The queen thanks Iris for stopping the disaster, and Iris drops into a bow, then straight up asks for permission to speak. She lays it out. Roland is gearing up for an invasion. Then the queen snaps back, a war with Melzeria. A whisper cuts through the hall as nobles scramble to debate one thing: how Iris gets kicked out, and who they're crowning as the new true saint. A noble takes one look at Lloyd and goes, "Wait, that guy?" Because this average assistant mage supposedly has a 40% material gathering rate. Everyone laughs at him, baffled about why he's even here, and Lloyd blurts out, totally confused, "Why won't the queen recognize me?" Iris jumps in without hesitation, because it was Lloyd who took down the Black Crow. The whole hall goes dead silent, stunned out of their minds. Some people still refuse to believe it, shouting it's all just nonsense. The barbs keep getting thrown at Lloyd, and Iris clamps her jaw tight. Then Isal barrels in, booming over the nobles to call out their stupidity. The queen snaps for silence, and the room knows better than to argue. No one even dares to breathe. Every head goes still at once. She says it straight: real elegance isn't about perfect moments, it's about staying calm when life throws curveballs, and if you want greatness, you'd better master that composure. With a sly smile, she throws down the gauntlet. Tell me, is Lloyd truly worthy of beating the Black Crow? In the arena, the queen is absolutely ecstatic, while Iris can't help but blush at her brand new costume. Then they unveil Melzeria's strongest knight, the Dandelion Knight of 100 Flowers. The queen summons Lloyd for a duel and lets his allies join in, all because she wants to witness his elegance. Meanwhile, Iris can't believe his suit, and when she blurts it out, the queen just smiles coolly and says, "It's elegant." Sephilia and Isal snap into action, slamming their blades to block the knight's strike, while Isal hammers into Lloyd's mind, "Don't you dare lose heart." Lloyd's jaw drops at Iris's outfit, but Isal snaps him back, reminding him he's got his own secret to hide. Then she orders Sephilia to take the fight down and humiliate their opponent with the twin blades. Sephilia blurts, "Jam and bread," and Isal snaps, repeating the order again, pure annoyance sparking as if their forgetfulness just lit a fuse. The knight blasts out the magic dandy Giga Bloom flash and smashes Isal. Lloyd panics as a fresh round gets announced, and Iris grabs his hand. Iris's resolve flares up. Lloyd's mockers have pushed her too far, and she grabs him and demands he finally show what he's truly capable of. Lloyd's confidence is coming roaring back, and with Iris at his side, they smash into a full-on attack. Right now, Ruby in the capital is seething over the street noise, slamming the curtains shut. Yet that smile on her face screams one thing: her battle is only getting started. With a graceful, polite smile, she welcomes her visitor, Crowley, the Magical Association's chief mage. Ruby smiles and thanks them for stopping by, saying it's truly an honor. Then Crowley shrugs like it's nothing, insisting that in these days you can reach anywhere as long as you've got a crew. They both know it. This is only the warm-up, because the real game kicks off right now, and under those smiles the political pressure is so sharp it could flip history's entire future. Ruby watched him with her whole heart clenched, because this wasn't some random guest. It was Crowley, the legendary archmage, the hero who helped crush the Demon King 2 centuries ago, and even if he now lived in quiet, his presence still felt impossible to ignore. For Ruby, this visit was a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot. If she played her cards right, she'd cash in on a mountain of orders, stack a fortune, and flip her whole fate. So with eyes shining and a fistful of hope, she slid over cookies and tried to charm that mage. But one careless step and she tripped, then the teacup shot straight into Crowley's face. A shield snapped into existence the second the attack hit the air and Crowley stopped it dead. Then he barked, stern as stone. Why would cookies be packed with explosive ingredients? The taste was awful. Ruby was so stunned she went silent because she recognized the recipe the second the magic kicked in. She finally blurted that she only meant to add a little kick. Crowley didn't waste a second. She barked an order for Ruby to prep for the mission to grab the materials right now. Ruby stalled for a breath, then handed over a list of overdue orders, praying it would ease the weight on her shoulders. The moment he read the request, seriousness snapped onto his face, because the list named Flirt Einsel, a phantom flower that blooms only in lands no one can reach. He blurted in shock, "You really think I'll have it by tomorrow?" Because even from brutal Arya, those materials usually took weeks to crawl in and out here in the wilderness. Ruby promised she wasn't telling him to walk at all. She'd been left a teleportation circle by her predecessor, and it'll whisk him nearly all the way to where they need to go. Crowley froze. He'd never seen a real teleportation circle up close. Ruby shot wide-eyed, asking if nobody used them. Silence hit hard, then Crowley finally snapped his gaze to her and said, "Lady Alchemy." He praised her fire for alchemy to the heavens, but then he snapped, warning her not to ever underestimate the other magical schools. Ruby bowed her head, then Crowley snapped, warning that uncharted lands are where thousands get wiped out, and she let out a shaky laugh, refusing to believe he was serious. She noticed Lloyd always showed up with every single thing she asked for. Crowley answered with pure reverence, "If this is real, then Lloyd has already climbed past him," and Crowley didn't waste a second calling Lloyd a chronicler-class magician. Ruby went still, totally thrown off by the words about a chronicle class. Did Lloyd really climb that high, or was it all too good to be true? Crowley watched her face change right there in real time. He added, "And trust me, she's got serious potential. One day she'll be able to stand toe-to-toe with Lloyd." And right then, she flashed back to little Lloyd in the shelter, crying, alone, trapped in the dark, and that painful memory slammed into the image of the magician standing in front of her, twisting her smile into something sharp and wrong. She snapped at Crowley, tearing into him for being blind to his own mediocrity, mocking that even Lloyd could pull off that order while Crowley was just hiding behind excuses. She didn't just dismiss the Demon King legend and the heroes, she laughed at it and called the whole thing a fake, empty story. Crowley's aura erupted, his whole body blazed in a hellfire glow. Ruby went rigid, frozen in pure, silent terror. The air turned heavy with brutal magical pressure, and with sacred fury roaring in his chest, he vowed he would never forgive the insult aimed at his comrades. He demanded she swallow her words back, but Ruby only roared louder and with one final cut called him a talentless wizard. Right then, a thunderous explosion ripped through the room, shaking everything to its core. Crowley's body crashed onto the floor, and there was not a single sign that he'd even breathe again. Ruby's scream tore through the air, and in the next breath everything unraveled into pure chaos. The knights charged into the room, barking for answers, and Ruby, ghost-pale and trembling, couldn't squeeze out a single word. Meanwhile, miles away in the holy kingdom of Roland, something bigger was brewing. The priests finally heard the Black Crow was beaten, and panic hit one of them hard because he couldn't stop regretting the moment he handed her the Staff of Destruction. He'd thought she was a ruthless killer, but she turned out to be nothing more than pathetic Eastern trash. The sacred scepter crashed to the ground with a brutal thud, and behind the priest the king just watched in icy silence, unmoved by a single thing. With icy confidence the king declared, "Resistance is useless." Then he laid out his dream of true peace, forging the entire Western continent into one united force. Alchemy sprawled in the bath, totally relaxed, then couldn't help but stare, because when she looked at Lloyd, his strength suddenly hit her like charm and she found him seriously noble-looking too. She told him to wear stuff like that more often if he wanted even more respect, and Lloyd nodded right away. After everything she just witnessed, Alchemy finally swallowed her doubts and realized she could trust Iris's words. Then she wasted no time, calling everyone together on the spot to hammer out a battle plan. Iris stepped up and warned everyone that the Temple of Wind wasn't an accident. It was a provocation cooked up by the Holy Kingdom of Roland, and she begged them to hold back on military retaliation. Iris makes it crystal clear she's trying to dodge civilian casualties, and she stands by that refined, principled line. Forget war, she and their allies decided to hit Roland with crushing trade sanctions, even if it squeezed the everyday people hard, and Iris sincerely thanked them for it. Alchemy warned that as long as Prince Geese isn't stopped, there's no real solution. No one should know that better than they do. Lloyd's eyes flicked to Iris by accident. Later, Iris turned to everyone and poured out a heartfelt thank you for all their support and loyalty. This all pushed the idea of using her family's country house as a temporary base. Lloyd couldn't stop wondering if Iris had been quietly carrying the weight of taking care of the prince for ages. Sophia leaned in and asked Iris if they could slip into a little break until evening, then she blurted out an awkward apology like, "I didn't even think about that." Sophia grinned and shoved Iris into Lloyd's arms for the entire day, and the moment hit him like a curveball, pure, mild shock. Far away, the two were going at it. One snapped in frustration and demanded what Taruru was doing, and she let out an exhausted sigh before telling him to follow her, while Isal chimed in that she'd hit the Adventurers Guild and urged everyone else to go have a blast in the city. While they walked, Lloyd suddenly realized something that hit hard. He had zero clue about any fun spots in the capital. He decided to team up with Iris and keep things casual with small talk. Then, out of nowhere, he blurted, "So, is the prince a total monster?" He instantly regretted asking, and Iris quickly swore he was totally fine. She insisted the prince wasn't wicked at all, he was just desperate. A noble goal wrapped in way too radical methods, and that's exactly where they broke apart. Lloyd mulled it over, but right then a sharp, accusatory voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Why won't Iris get it yet? The voice demanded to survive the demonic invasion, crush every pagan soul, but Iris fired back, if we rule like that, we'll become demons right alongside them. Even if it builds a single world from one man's will, it still seals millions into a pointless slaughter. The prince's agitation kept rising as he snapped, if Iris's holy barriers can secure victory, then we won't need to turn radical. But then he stopped, because her powers just weren't enough. Once Lloyd finally heard it all, he blurted out an apology for his way too inappropriate question, and Iris just laughed. No hurt, no anger. Lloyd went silent after that because he finally got what she'd been forced to swallow every single day. After that, they finally kicked off toward a brand new place. When they finally arrived, Lloyd leaned in, eyes sharp, and studied the strange new place like he was reading a battlefield. Iris told me this is a magical traveling fair, one that rolled into my hometown when I was a kid, and I never forgot it. Tucked among the attractions was a mountain track she'd been dreaming about for ages, one she finally got to ride. They slid into their seats together, and the moment the ride lurched into motion, Lloyd's mind flashed back to that one time he spent the whole day wrestling a dragon just to beat it. Iris didn't answer, and panic shot through him as he asked, "Are you dizzy?" But she shook her head. This wasn't the trip at all. After everything that happened, her feelings had just gone numb, and that constant strain can smother even the quiet, joyful moments. Lloyd understood that all too well, yet he couldn't stop staring at the way this miracle even works. Suddenly, I realized something wild. The whole attraction is run by hand manually. The attraction ran by hand, because that's how it had to be, and it worked. Lloyd clocked the stranger Dandelion and demanded to know why he was there. Dandelion acted shocked, swore it was just a coincidence, and called his carousel work training, saying it mixes exercise with kids' smiles. Lloyd and Iris even vouched for his good nature, but right behind them a kid yelled that Lloyd was that same loser. Dandelion scooped up the little one with care, then shot down the insult on the spot, declaring that Lloyd was stronger than him, so Lloyd thanked him, and the kids, blown away, couldn't stop staring in awe. They leaned in, peppering him with questions about how he pulled it off, their admiration blazing openly for him. Dandelion told Iris his day was done and sent her off with a "have a great date," and she blushed so hard her cheeks went red. Then Lloyd asked if it was time to head back, and Iris just nodded. As Lloyd walked back to the castle, he locked eyes with her like he couldn't look away. He leaned in carefully and asked, "If you finally stopped this war, would you come back and play St. Roland again? Wouldn't it be best for her to keep things peaceful, right there with the people she loves?" Iris fired back, saying she didn't just want to talk, she wanted to share her story first. Right out of the gate, the bishop spotted a rare, blazing gift in her, holy magic, so he shipped her off to a special school where future saints are forged. Lloyd froze in disbelief. He'd always thought every country got just one saint, but Iris snapped back. The name is singular, yet the real power can belong to multiple capable people. To wield holy magic isn't some lucky gift, it's a crushing vow, because you're the one holding up the magical barriers of a whole nation. Only someone who's mastered history, prayer, and politics can survive the initiation, so she turned to Lloyd and demanded he recognize her chosen path. He admitted she'd clawed her way through an insanely brutal ordeal, and Iris shot back that the real fuel behind her always was one thing: protecting the people she loved. The market-working mother, the brothers toiling in the fields, the night father who only dropped by the school now and then, and every plain, hardworking soul in Roland were all her heart. As the clash with the prince kept escalating, she pushed back harder and harder, until they finally kicked her out. Those friends who trusted her righteousness refused to let her fall. They stayed by her side, backing her every step and choosing her path with her. Getting back to the rank of saint seemed near impossible, but she still clung to one thing: she genuinely refused to leave the people who mattered most. She admitted that loneliness crushes her from the inside, and it's unbearable. Lloyd couldn't forget how drained she looked, even after everything she did for Ruby, so when he saw the worry on his face, Iris blushed hard, but Lloyd just kept watching, stunned by her real sincerity. He swore to himself he'd do anything it took to make her smile. Iris choked up, tears spilling over, and sincerely thanked them. Then they cracked open the hall doors and boom, warm words poured in, praising their hard work and that brutal long ride to the capital. Iris stared in awe at the lavish banquet, and a strict butler boomed that every single dish, one by one, was crafted in Maltruse's style by his own hands until Taruru snapped, "No way, everyone helped." When Iris reached for the food, the butler snapped in and shut her down for acting rude at the table, and Taruru, still chewing, muttered something back with her mouth stuffed. The servant snapped her back to manners again, and right then, Iris spun toward Lloyd. She swore, "When it's all over, we're doing this again, every single one of us, right here at the festive table." Lloyd nodded and said it clear, "Then this is your fresh start." Iris flashed a smile and locked that promise deep in her heart, silently sworn. That night, whispers hit the barracks like a bomb. Ruby, the alchemist, had been arrested, and people swore it was because she snapped in despair over her debts and went after an influential figure. Locked inside her cell, Ruby seethed with fury, spitting curses at the lies that were turned right against her. Ruby shrieked with pure despair. Why was nobody rushing to her rescue? She wasn't just some nobody, she was an alchemist, an aristocrat. Then, bam, something slammed into her cell and she jolted hard, panicking as she couldn't even make sense of what was happening. From the pitch-black shadows, a creepy whisper slithered through the air. One prisoner blurted an apology, another groaned that their escape plan failed. A third muttered about being starving, and then she recognized the voice. "She's probably the kingdom's top alchemist," so Ruby asked carefully, and then, "So what if it is true?" Someone urged her to tag along with them and head straight for Roland. Another refused, sneering that she was too important for Maltria, yet the moment they turned her into a political trophy, their status could skyrocket. After botching the assassination and spilling secrets, death was basically waiting for them anyway. So one of them snapped for silence, and Ruby, with every ticking minute, her grip started slipping. One of the prisoners nudged her to come with him. "What's the big deal?" he said, and Ruby just scoffed because they couldn't even get out. Then she saw it, the key, and the cell door was already wide open. Someone warned the escape wouldn't be a walk in the park. The border was still a long, brutal haul away. That warning only fanned the fire in their determination. Ruby watched them like she didn't trust a single step. "Suddenly, I remembered my atelier. There's a teleportation circle there, and if they can wrangle the magic, we can use it." She strutted up and asked, dead confident, where it was, and right then a plan lit up in her head. Act like she was dragged along against her will. If it looks like she was forced, then even the whole Crowley situation will get twisted into just a misunderstanding. "It's not over yet," the words hit. "It's just a clone." Someone blurts, shocked, "Wait, why are you talking to yourself?" She snaps back, "Habit," and then they bolt straight out of there. At Lloyd's castle and others besides, everyone gets yanked to the reception hall for a summons. Still half asleep, Lloyd blurts, "What happened this early?" Nero just shrugs it off and the butler appears like nothing's wrong. Breakfast isn't ready yet. When all of them finally crammed around the table, Iris reached out to Lloyd and alchemy flashed the grim news. Someone tried to assassinate a top official in the capital. The suspect bolted right alongside the Black Crow, and now reports are screaming about a brutal attack hitting the border garrison. With a stone-cold face, Alchemy declared the invasion of Malseria. Roland was officially in motion, and the moment breakfast started, war exploded straight into the room. Lloyd confessed he never had a clue what the prince was really planning until the Black Raven showed up, and that shock is what pushed him to betray Roland. Iris stood there reeling, realizing every single move she'd made had only blown the situation wide open. Even so, she refused to stay away. She raced back to Roland, determined to win over the prince because she knew she had to stop him. The steward yanked her to a stop. Once you hear those words, there's no going back now. The army's already pounding at the border. Side by side, they won't pull it off, but if Iris goes alone, there's still a shot. Iris swept her gaze across everyone and genuinely thanked them from the bottom of her heart. Suddenly, Lloyd's mind snapped back to something vital. Roland can get there, straight through the teleportation circle inside Ruby's atelier. But that means he'll have to face Ruby herself, doubts and all, and finally, with a shaky breath, he spoke up. Everyone snapped their heads toward him like, "Wait, what are you thinking?" But Lloyd cut in and suddenly started mumbling. Then he only managed to whisper Ruby, and just collapsed, crushed by pure, overwhelming anxiety. Teruru cracked a joke, saying the thought scared him so badly it stole his breath, and Lloyd, barely able to string words together, muttered again that he had a plan, so Nero blinked in shock, asking what he was trying to say. Iris snapped at herself for being so impatient. She just wanted to read his thoughts at least once. Meanwhile, Alchemy snapped her fingers for the servants and unveiled the demon-snagged artifact, an exquisite tool that used to have a clunky, ugly name until she remade it with her own hands. Put it beside someone who's asleep and boom, you can slip straight into their mind, and Nero even likened it to the hypnosis the Black Crow uses. Alchemy ruled the artifact was basically hypnotic magic, then warned the fallout could be anything, totally unpredictable. Still, if they dared to gamble, it might work, and Iris didn't hesitate to step forward right away. Nero also tried to bolt, but her soul snapped back. Someone had to stay behind to save everyone if it all went wrong. Iris slipped up to Lloyd, whispering her request for permission through sleep. In his dream, Lloyd jolted awake and instantly knew where he was, Ruby's studio. He remembered how he'd been dying to tell everyone about the teleportation circle. Then boom, a familiar voice snapped through the air, "Ruby." She instantly tore into him for moving so slow. Lloyd went stone still. Wait, was she actually here? She taunted him, sneering that his ancestors were nothing but snails, and the old insults came roaring back as he stewed in the belief that she had absolutely no right to demand anything. Guilt crushed Lloyd until he felt like he didn't deserve to exist. Sure, he'd betrayed Iris by failing to live up to the trust she placed in him. And out of nowhere, a fresh voice snapped into the air. Yeah, it was Iris. Ruby jerked back and demanded, "Who are you?" And the moment she figured it out, she knew it had to be Lloyd's friend. Then she blasted her with a storm of brutal words. Iris went wide-eyed because to her, Lloyd was an unbelievable magician. Ruby snarled at her to shut up, then crushed Lloyd in front of everyone, telling him that with a measly 40% collection rate, he was an utter failure. She snapped that Lloyd would always stay her subordinate, but Iris dug in her heels. She refused to swallow that injustice. Ruby's world exploded in rage, and that fury conjured a water dragon that slammed her so hard she flew back. Iris panted, stunned she'd even landed the hit. Ruby stood up and admitted Iris had ballsier courage than she expected. But raw strength wouldn't crack this nut. This world runs on memories and thoughts, and whoever has the stronger will is the one that wins. Lloyd sank into despair and in his head, admitted he was beaten. He yelled into the void, clinging to Lyra, Mars, and Isolde, the people who'd fought for him. Yet the moment Ruby came to mind, fear still swallowed him whole, so he begged everyone to clear out, but Iris refused. He snapped, "Just ask for help. Even when that wall looks unbeatable, don't punish yourself. Friends are there to lift you up." Lloyd had always been her rock. Now it was her turn to step in and back him up, so she stretched out her hand. The boy grabbed her right at that exact moment. Iris ballooned into something monstrous, so huge her silhouette swallowed the entire dream world. Ruby shrieked in total shock, and Iris carefully lifted her up. And she sealed it up inside a container, smiling like it was already over, then said, "Now everything's fine." Deep in his heart, Lloyd remembered the promise. He'd do anything for Iris, and when she finally thanked him, it felt like he'd been handed the power to help her back. Lloyd snapped his eyes open. Back in the real world, Iris was right there beside him. Snap, he finally came to his senses and blurted out that the teleportation circle really was in Ruby's workshop, and the whole crew rushed there without wasting a second. Later, just outside the atelier, Iris leaned in and asked how Lloyd was holding up. He told her the truth. Ruby's voice didn't tug at his heart anymore. For the first time, he could finally meet her gaze and ask her to use the circle. He lunged toward the door, raising his hand to knock, but he never got the chance because a night guard slid into view and cut him off, barking that the area was temporarily closed. Isolde felt the danger in the air and snapped, "What's going on?" The guard snapped that the homeowner is suspected of attempted murder and now an investigation is in full swing, leaving the whole group completely stunned. Iris's jaw dropped because what in the world could Ruby have possibly done? Lloyd didn't waste a second. He decided to stay out of it completely since they were going to use the teleportation circle anyway. Thanks to a teleportation circle, they shot straight to Lloyd's gathering point in Roland. Isolde fired the biggest question of all: what happens after we meet the prince? One wrong move and we could all be doomed. Iris snapped her gaze to Lloyd. "So what's the plan?" Lloyd just nodded. "I'll spell it out after the relocation." Nero kept it practical. She rolled up with a van stuffed to the brim with provisions and snacks. Lloyd whipped his attention back to his soul, demanding, "You coming too?" It answered with a nod. Orders were already locked in and it couldn't walk away from a crisis that could even swallow Manhwa. Then he whipped around to Sephi, desperate to go yet terrified of becoming a burden, and every word of his apology came out like it hurt. Iris started hunting for Tarura, and yeah, she would have shut this down before, but now all she could do was pray for caution, quietly and from the heart. Once everyone got their roles and the last prep was done, the whole team huddled up around the circle. Lloyd snapped, "Line up," because he'd beam you over one at a time to dodge a fatal overlap, and one teleport glitch could spell disaster. The boy clenched his bravery and finally moved, because in his head there was only one thought: wait, Prince guys. Meanwhile, Ruby started to panic somewhere else. Where were the others? She was supposed to get picked up. She works for Prince Roland, right? That's the whole deal. The Raven snapped back, "They're almost there." Ruby snapped at the cold under her breath, then her eyes caught a moving crowd on the horizon. Warriors, Roland's knights for sure, and right among them was the Black Raven. In the blink of an eye, Ruby and the crow were snapped into shackles. Ruby blurted for answers in pure panic. "What's happening? What now?" But the guard cut her off with a cold command: "Be silent." She didn't get to talk without permission. "Ruby's fate is sealed. She's been sentenced to die." A full week flew by, then they finally crash-landed in the capital, right where they needed to be. The Black Raven called the prince in. She told him the assassination attempt had blown up, and that she'd hauled in someone priceless. The prince saw everything she did, and chose to drop his anger, forgiving her on the spot. They embraced, and one guard snapped, asking what it all meant, while Ruby's stomach twisted, wondering if she just made the biggest mistake of all by trusting the crow. Later, inside the throne room of Roland's castle, Soldier Nault blurted that the attack on the Mel's front was pushing forward just as planned. Then a woman shot back with unshakable confidence. Ruby realized the prince was locked in, desperate for a quick ending, and that this mystery man was none other than Prince Roland. The prince vowed to unite the whole continent, the exact dream the late king chased until demons murdered him, and promised he'd take the throne once it came true, while the woman declared only he was meant to rule. She vowed that Ezekiel would stand behind Jesus for his great calling. Black Raven looked on edge. Ruby clenched her teeth and muttered a furious curse under her breath. The prince was truly moved by Ezekiel's kindness, especially compared to Iris. He'd always slammed the brakes on war-blasted tax hikes for farmers and demanded the city bring in the absolute best chef. Then he let out a heavy sigh because the saint's power had turned into a crushing burden. Ezekiel shoved the past aside. Right now she's here and that's all that matters. Ruby watched it all in quiet silence. The soldier pushed on. During patrol, they caught the Black Raven and she spilled everything. She couldn't take Iris down, but she did manage to deliver someone incredibly valuable. Prince cut her off cold, like her failure and this girl too were nothing at all to him. He slammed a death sentence on both of them. She demanded they be hauled off, and Ruby shot out a quiet protest under her breath. Ruby hissed that she never should have stepped into this place, bragging she was Malzeria's best alchemist. Then Ezekiel cut right through her words. The saint snapped that life wasn't something to toss around, and demanded everyone hand over every captive she was protecting. Ruby's eyes widened at the sheer shock of how everything flipped so fast. The soldier barked at her to thank the saint for sparing her, and Ruby finally realized they'd escaped death by a hair. Behind those locked doors, whispers were flying as everyone tried to figure out who these newcomers really were, and the Black Crow pressed for answers, grilling people on where they came from and how they were holding up. An old man swung in and called himself a bishop who once backed Iris. Then the jester blurted out that he'd been mocking the prince, and the woman finally confessed the worst. She skinned the girl and murdered her. Ruby snapped, "Do you know what the saint wants from us?" And nobody had an answer, everyone just shrugged. Then Ruby swung her gaze to Ezekiel and the old man finally broke it down. "She's not from here, demons shattered her in another country. Roland took her in and that's how she became the new saint." Ruby stayed stone still, then a loud voice boomed, "Everyone's here, all of you gather now." Ezekiel stepped in and the Black Crow jerked with terror, sensing a monster prowling nearby. She calmly told him, "This is my favorite," then snapped, "Don't look around, just trust me," and ordered her people to hand those documents out to everyone. Ezekiel told them she's fallen for alchemy and wants to drag slaves along for the expedition, and Ruby immediately snapped that it's just a slick excuse to snag materials. She stared at the task and knew deep down it was totally impossible. Another alchemist snapped that most spots on that list were total mysteries, so they weren't assigned. They were basically being marched to their deaths. The beast hit him like lightning, instant and brutal. Then Ezekiel stomped down on the fallen body as Ruby sprinted straight to where the strike landed. The saint leaned in and made it crystal clear, this wasn't an order at all, it was a full-on test of faith. She made it crystal clear every bit of their faith was hers, and if she ordered them to leap straight into the abyss, they'd do it smiling, no questions asked. Ruby froze in pure terror while Ezekiel barked a hard command to set off. Anyone who comes back missing the required items gets instantly executed. Ruby slammed to a halt in a dead end and realized, the beyond is the place where holy power can't reach. Then she stared at the crow, remembering how she'd promised, "If you trust me and listen, everything will be okay." The Black Crow remembered it all. The prince adored Ezekiel's gentle touch, unlike that previous saint, until that same softness turned into a weapon for stealing power, and now the question burned. Was it really her who replaced Iris? The jester realized one brutal truth. Going up against Ezekiel was basically suicide. The old man leaned in and warned him, if they wanted to live, they had to stay together, no exceptions. Out of nowhere, something got yanked by an invisible force, and then the monsters crashed onto the scene. Panic exploded, everyone bolted for the exits, no questions asked. Even a chihuahua-sized bear was crawling among the creatures, and everyone instantly knew one thing: this wasn't any ordinary cave. The air turned pitch black. Alron. Ruby bolted ahead, desperation screaming in her chest. She snapped at the crow, "Is there a counterspell?" and burst into a wild chant, because she wasn't just casting, she was birthing clones right in front of them. Then the monsters surged in like a wave. Ruby snapped that these monsters don't just smash the clones, they swallow them whole. The crow stayed eerily calm, calmly sewing through their clothes until the beast finally chokes out and Ruby was left absolutely horrified. But that beast wouldn't stop for a second. An insatiable monster with hellish chaos spilling everywhere like the world itself was on fire. A shell crashed down right beside Ruby and she barely dodged, until her escape stopped cold when something grabbed her leg and behind her, a horrifying maw started to open. The grotesque creature surged forward, towering over Ruby like a living nightmare. Her fate hung in the air as the jaws tightened, ready to crush and devour her without a shred of mercy. Ruby stared straight into the massive maw, refusing to look away. She slipped into a goodbye to life, rage pouring out as she cursed Lloyd, slow, foolish, and utterly worthless. Then it hit her, she suddenly remembered the way he'd apologized for dragging her through all that trouble again and again. Teeth clenched tight, she swore to herself, one day she'd become an alchemist just as good as him. Darkness crashed over her consciousness like a wave. Ruby erupted forward and drove a knife straight into the monster's mouth, ripping it open with raw, ferocious force. She shouted that if Lloyd could haul in materials, then she could do it too. After the attack, it crashed to the ground. Then Black Crow snapped the truth. The beast is dead and tucked among the spoils is a baby chihuahua bear, the one missing piece they need. Ruby let out a weird little chuckle, already daydreaming about a steamy hot bath, though she knew it was totally impossible. Then Lloyd showed up, breathless with good news that everyone made it through safely, and Iris let out a huge wave of relief as she watched them cross the border without a hitch, while the old man started flexing, convinced something like bug legs should have sprouted on him by now. Iris demanded to know Lloyd's plan to stop the prince, and he finally cracked it open. His trick, a box item. The plan was wild: lock the prince up, then drag him back, and everyone stared at him, jaws dropping in pure shock. That sounded insane. Who in their right mind could lock someone up inside something like that? But Lloyd swore he used it as a tent, and it's actually comfy. Iris stared into the chaos, thinking hard, could this wild plan actually work? Those subject boxes are insanely rare magical relics, yet Lloyd acts like they're worthless, and Isolde snaps back that nobody would ever think to use her for kidnapping. Nero pitched sending the prince straight back to Melzaria to start peace talks, and Saphilia snapped that he's an asset now, only Lloyd can yank him out of this mess. Isolde frowned and demanded she explain exactly what she meant. From now on, everyone else had to break off and do their own thing. Lloyd clocked it. And wait, weren't they all supposed to be from here? Iris's cheeks went red. She swung her hand forward and sent a heartfelt wish for real, fruitful cooperation. They stared at them from a distance, unable to look away. Using magic, Ezekiel finally saw them, and she hissed that the insects had slipped inside again. A jaw-dropping magical creature burst into view right in front of them. Saphilia leaned in, wondering could she actually eat that meat? Lloyd snapped to attention at once, realizing it wasn't food at all. It was a puppet, shoved and steered by a mage. Iris let out a heavy sigh. She was finally back, and the prince was waiting in the cathedral tower. Suddenly, an alarm blared inside the cathedral, shattering the silence. Someone slipped into the castle. Ezekiel's familiar is gone, destroyed. The prince clenched his jaw. Did Iris and the rest finally come back? Ezekiel's fury erupted after her familiar got defeated. She ordered the soldiers to hunt down the criminals and wipe them out, no mercy, no exceptions, and for Iris, stubborn refusal to quit is just who she is. Nero realized storming the main entrance was basically suicide, so Lloyd, cool as ever, told him to blast a route straight through. Iris yanked Lloyd to a stop, worried about what he was about to do, but he snapped back that they wouldn't move another step until the guards were gone. Then the soldiers heard something, and Iris shoved urgency into her voice. Stop. His soul practically screamed, did I lose my mind? Because it reminded him Dandelion and Black Crow can bounce back, but not everyone else can. If a regular person got hit by his magic, it'd be instant death, and Lloyd's stomach dropped the moment he understood it. Even with his boosted body, that strike could still kill him. He suggested plant magic, but Iris snapped back, say the word and they'd get spotted instantly. Isolde shut it down hard, insisting that if he can't rein in himself, then no magic goes at people at all. Iris clocked it instantly. Lloyd had roamed those wild lands for so long that the very idea of normal had warped beyond recognition. Isolde reminded him loud and clear, don't start a war. Stay hidden in the shadows where you belong. Meanwhile, Cecilia was already plotting something big. Isolde leaned in and demanded to know why she was there, right in that moment. Saphilia snapped that the food was all gone. Isolde couldn't believe it, asking if there really wasn't enough. Then Lloyd burst in, demanding to know where everything was, and Saphilia pointed him to the pantry while Isolde said they'd stashed the leftovers here. Iris slammed the brakes and stopped Isolde before the fight could explode. She urged them to turn back and hunt for another route. Right there, the soldiers chimed in that this stretch was barely guarded, so sending reinforcements here would be a total waste. Not a single one of them saw the danger creeping closer in the shadows. Iris and Lloyd slipped through the courtyard dressed as soldiers, but Isolde's warning rang in their ears. Don't improvise, one slip and exposure would be deadly. Lloyd mulled over it. What kind of magic could slip them forward without anyone noticing? Then the soul in him snapped the answer into place. His chest item was the key until another soldier suddenly shouted at them. The second Lloyd and Iris clocked the threat, their instincts screamed. Then a soldier snapped, demanding to know their post. Iris snapped back that they were partisans sent to deal with the library's chaos, and Lloyd clocked every word, quietly judging her answers like the kind a former holy knight could pull off. She stepped in, offered her help, and demanded they be let into the library. The soldiers started grilling for the culprits, and Iris snapped to attention. This needed a flawless cover story. They pointed at a mage who supposedly had only a 1% hit rate for gathering materials, but Lloyd cut in fast. Nope, it's closer to 40%. They also talked about two merchants hiding among the holy knights, Sophia, the selfish berserker, and her soul, the candy monkey, and trust me, both of them are terrifyingly strong. The soldiers swore it was them who chased out the former saint, and then they laughed, flashing those creepy demonic faces like it was all a joke. Iris snapped into action and hurled an icy spear, furious to the core. The soul froze at that reaction, but Iris cut in with icy calm. We're moving on. Then a message hit. Dead bodies were spotted near the great corridor, and Ezekiel decided the guard was pointless, not caring at all. She wasn't even fazed. This prison was packed with magical monsters, and sooner or later those invaders would realize they'd walked straight into a trap. She shouted for the monsters to surge forward, promising they'd strike back for every fallen soul. Lloyd stepped up and volunteered to take on the creatures himself. Suddenly, a guild man stepped forward and spoke straight to his soul. Then the soul snapped back, asking why they were there. He told us they got nabbed right after finishing a mission by the border, and because they're from Melzaria, everyone instantly flagged them as targets. Now the regime isn't just tossing mercenaries at the slaughter, it's dragging traitors and regular people into the same doomed war. Iris went wide-eyed with disbelief, questioning what the princess was really doing, while Lloyd barked, "Hurry!" and shoved everyone into his chest. Even in that cramped space, the rescued folks clung to the title Messenger of the Holy. Lloyd shoved them forward because time was slipping away fast. Then they spotted huge doors and the horrible thought hit. Someone could be right inside. When they cracked the door open, a child chained to the floor, barely breathing, stared up at them, and Isolde snapped into action, instantly realizing she was moments from death and needed help now. Lloyd recognized the girl as a mage from another country who'd been taken captive, while Iris stood there frozen in shock, realizing the cruelty didn't stop even at children. Iris tore into herself, because deep down she knew she was the one who let all of this unfold. Lloyd couldn't figure out what drove the prince, but he did know this: if nothing shifted, the innocent would keep paying the price. Suddenly the soldiers burst in, and right away, the wrongdoers were uncovered. The crew braced for impact, trapped on every side as battle closed in. Isolde ripped the wind into their hands, shouting, "We're almost at the cathedral." Then she and the others swung off the other way to draw every eye so Iris and Lloyd could smash through and go even farther. Iris shot Lloyd a look and said, "Let's show the prince what real plant magic looks like." Lloyd grinned and nodded, fully on board. Meanwhile, deep inside the cathedral itself, someone kept a sharp eye on everything as the prince demanded to know if the troublemakers had slipped through, and she quickly bowed her head, apologizing. She admitted her opponents were tougher than she'd imagined, but she still promised one thing: Roland's sacred fiery knights, the strongest unit in his army, were standing guard over the cathedral. The cathedral bridge stretched wide and open, perfect for a long-range strike, yet the guards were so tight that not even a mouse could slip past. But just like that, the giant grapevines crushed every soldier standing before the prince, and he froze in shock. Then Ezekiel shoved him to look around. The cathedral got swallowed whole by a thick, living tangle of vines. Right when the prince was scrambling to make sense of everything, Iris burst in and declared, loud and deadly, that nobody would ever come for him now, because she'd been the one who begged this person for help. The prince demanded answers, trembling with fear as rage exploded in him, and he snapped that it was all just hypocrisy. According to him, Iris just wrecks power and institutions so the demons can swagger to victory, but Iris shuts that down hard, saying it's just a smokescreen. His real nightmare wasn't the danger, it was losing control and blowing the plan while she and her crew sprinted in to protect everyone, because that's exactly what the holy must do. If the prince really wants to rule, he can't hand it off, he has to take them down himself. His jaw clenched with rage as he snapped that Iris was just a stubborn girl. A brutal attack came screaming straight at them, and Lloyd snapped into action. His shield caught the hit and stopped it cold. Ezekiel surged forward, swearing he'd grant their wish by personally wiping out every last one of them. Right now, the current saints stood blocking their path, right in front of them. The prince sneered, wondering how Iris could even stand beside a mage this dangerous. Then Lloyd straightened up, checked who they were looking at, yep, it was the prince, and asked if they should just grab him right there. Ezekiel said it ice cold, back then they only came to die. And Iris, she got hit hardest, getting shoved aside with a brutal denial that she could ever be holy. Lloyd then clocked the nightmare detail. He was wearing the exact same outfit as Iris. She stared him down and sneered, saying that even if he'd proved himself, anyone who makes too much noise deserves punishment. Ezekiel snapped his fingers and hurled a spell, Delta Stream, one of the deadliest wind magic techniques around. Iris instantly clocked it. This was the purest, highest-tier wind spell. Lloyd snapped into a counterattack, hurling out 4 shields all at once. At that exact moment outside, even the sacred knights couldn't handle the frenzied vines still ravaging the fortress, and Isolde screamed at everyone to look right at the cathedral. Vines had already chewed through the walls and snapped the supports, and that grand building started to tilt toward disaster. Knights stared in stunned silence, fully wrecked by what they just saw. The prince burst into laughter, victory already in his grasp, and he asked if everyone finally understood Ezekiel's real power. Then he smirked and dared that even Lloyd wouldn't be able to stand up to it. Ezekiel admitted it was seriously impressive, then, to her shock, Iris and Lloyd walked out unhurt, and Iris snapped back on the spot. She launched the spell Cyclone for a counterattack. That magical strike hit with an unexpected wallop, stunning both the prince and Ezekiel. Then Iris clocked it. She wasn't just casting, she was boosting the spell with pure physical power. The prince had the perfect view of the battle, then he totally missed it when Iris slipped in behind him. She hurled an icy spear, but the prince shot back instantly, blasting her with a storm of fireballs. Fury burned in him as he demanded, "Did you really come here to kill me?" And Iris shot back that she wasn't hunting death, she was desperate to get back home. Cornered with nowhere to run, the prince unleashed the alchemy Iris once gave him, spitting water bullets to fight his way out. Iris snapped a shield into place, then unleashed a boosted spell, Water Dragon, and it slammed in with terrifying knockout force. Iris let out a heavy sigh. This magic was draining her dry, and soon it would be useless again. The prince blinked in shock and demanded where she learned it. Iris answered without hesitation, "Lloyd taught her." Those words sliced deeper than any spell, ice cold. Bitterly, he remembered, Iris always nodded to Lloyd, but she never really listened to him. Memories slammed into him like the day Iris got crowned, and he could still hear them asking, "Iris Elizabeth Corpter, do you swear to dedicate your soul to the holy path?" With a trembling vow, she promised to shield the weak, unleash justice and peace, and scour the earth clean of evil and deceit. They crowned her a genius of the Holy Academy, handed her the title of saint, turned her into the perfect face of the theocracy, and boom, declared her the official betrothed of Prince Roland. That day, the maid Taruru strode up, introduced herself to Iris, and declared, "I've got you from here on out." Then she beckoned Iris in and let her settle while Iris stood there, stunned, soaking in just how amazing the castle looked. His towering halls and jaw-dropping beauty stole the breath from everyone, while the prince just wore a calm, silent smile as he watched. Could this wide-eyed girl really pull off becoming the saint of an entire nation? He demanded to know whether Chef Roland was already inside, cooking in the kitchen. Taruru blurted out that Lady Iris wanted every single person to savor mouth-watering dishes just like the ones her mother cooked at home. The prince just smirked like he didn't care. She knew nothing, and it showed. A kid who thought her mother was the best woman in the whole world. For some reason, everyone around her kept singing her praises, and before she knew it, she was standing there like a saint, right at the top of the nation's perfect ideal. Lloyd snapped his head to the present and asked if Nero only joined them because of what happened back then, right as Ezekiel once again bulldozed back into the battlefield because the fight was far from finished. The prince shut her down cold, declaring her stories didn't matter anymore, and then sneered that she'd always been nothing but an ignoramus. He dug up the memory of that brutal temple cleansing at the border, where the holy power crumbled and the whole situation spiraled into disaster. Iris finally met the Holy Knight and thanked him for guarding the temple, only for him to shrug it off and say it was just his job because his duties piled up so non-stop they felt impossible to count. Iris didn't even speak, she just said she was moving to the next point. The guard tried to bring up the payment for the escort, but he didn't get the chance. The prince, seething with irritation, cut her off with a look full of contempt, because to him, Iris clearly had no idea what responsibility or reality even meant. Demons are chewing up the world, dead and burning. The prince's father is gone for good. Now he's desperate for her help because only she can unite the lands and push the borders farther than anyone thought possible. He's set on forging a power that can stand up to the darkness, but Iris slams back, "This isn't unification at all, it's conquest, and that's how you widen the gap even further." She's convinced that when they start clawing at each other during an invasion, they're turning into demons, yet the prince erupts in fury because she clearly has zero clue what power demands and what responsibility means. How dare she even butt in? He's royal blood through and through, and she's just some village girl playing holy to get noticed. And just like that, Lloyd's face went ghost white, Iris crumpled into unconsciousness, and the prince loomed over her. Breath shaking and emotions spilling over, a drained, worn-out Iris finally blurts out, "Maybe he was right." She didn't grasp what his role truly demanded, but her heart wouldn't let her follow that fate, because deep down she's just a plain girl from the province. If the prince had ever talked to her straight, if he hadn't shoved her away and tried to end her, everything would have gone a totally different way, and she's still clinging to the lie that it's all her fault. That's why I stormed back. To stop him before it's truly too late, she clenches her resolve and unleashes her power, Water Dragon. The element blasts outward, swallowing everything in its path, until it finally engulfs the prince himself. While that's happening, Iris shoots Lloyd a signal as Ezekiel bursts forward and launches into the attack. Lloyd snaps his physical enhancement magic on, then with pure, brutal strength, he shoves her backward. Right then, he hurls the box up, crack, its lid bursts open, and the water dragon swallows the prince in midair. Trap did its job, boom, they won. Iris breaks into a smile, exhausted to the bone but fully relieved. In the shattered cathedral, it was just her and Lloyd left, then the boy bolted straight for her. Breathless, she stammers out, asking if he's okay, and when Lloyd tells her he's fine, you can tell something just startled him. A tense little silence snapped into place, and Iris quickly turned her gaze aside. She shot out a shaky apology, and the shame was crushing because Lloyd had seen her weak, shattered, and broken. Lloyd's cheeks flamed as awkwardness hit him, and then he finally reached out to brush his fingers against hers. He admitted it, he looked totally ridiculous too. Seeing Iris like this, vulnerable, real, washed all his fears away and left him finally at peace. She leaned in, stubborn as ever yet still far from perfect. Then Lloyd pulled her close, and outside the cathedral, Ruby started gathering everything she'd need. But a nasty premonition rattled inside her, screaming that something was horribly wrong. Then the raven caught her staring and demanded to know what happened. Suddenly, dark clouds swallowed the sky, then a colossal monster tore overhead, and its terrifying shadow alone sent them scrambling in fear. Ruby snapped into action and screamed, "Destroy him right now before it's too late." But the raven just froze, totally baffled. How was it supposed to do that? The creature didn't strike, it just swooped right over them, and both of them froze in pure horror because there weren't one but two, and both were closing in on Roland. Ezekiel could barely haul herself up, her body gnawing from the inside. She'd misjudged Lloyd, and now the final road to victory had vanished. Somebody yelled from nearby, crack. The box finally splintered open, and Lloyd saw it was packed to the brim with the water dragon's outburst as the very last straw. The box detonated, blasting everyone free. Then Ezekiel snapped his call for reinforcements, and a whole squad of monsters was already gearing up for battle. At that exact moment, she finally spotted what Iris had clenched in her hands. Ezekiel burst out of the shadows and into the light, her eyes locked on the target. The prince lost interest in her, so she snapped her finger at the girl instead, shouting that she was the real prize and they had better hand her over if they wanted to stay alive. Lloyd didn't understand a thing, so the prince isn't the prize anymore. Iris didn't even blink. She refused to hand that child to someone like him. Ezekiel let out an annoyed sigh, because Iris was at it again, ruining everything, failing the mission, and leaving him no choice but to pull the final trump card. Right in the middle of the transformation, a razor-sharp horn suddenly burst out from her forehead. Her body has totally transformed, and that revelation blew everyone's minds. Wait, she's not just a mage at all. Ezekiel is a demon, and to her, she's the living crown of holiness, so when the truth hits, it freezes her to the bone. Just as everyone was still trying to wrap their minds around what they'd seen, the demonic Ezekiel erupted into an attack, and right away, Lloyd barked, "Retreat." She ripped through the battlefield like a living nightmare, claws shredding everything in her path while her aura warped the air around her, and her only goal was to wipe everyone out. Voids ripped open a burst of explosion magic, calling it down like a lightning strike. A massive flash tore across the sky, blasting a deafening wave of raw power into everything in its path. Everyone surged forward as the impact hit, and the ground buckled under their feet. Then, out of the ruins, thick grapevines tore up through the rubble like they'd been waiting. Iris gaped in shock. Ezekiel's power matched Lloyd's blow for blow, and it was downright terrifying. And right then, Lloyd finally realized just how dangerous she really was. Ezekiel exploded forward, snapping into a swift, razor-true lunge. He slammed himself into the staff strike, twisting it aside like a shield. Then their eyes locked and the duel erupted. Next explosion hit, and the whole ground shook like it was about to split in two. After that brutal blow, it hit everyone at once. The castle was tilting, its foundations already splitting, and the battle showed zero signs of stopping. They battled like something beyond human, way beyond. Iris realized it in an instant. This wasn't a fight anymore, it was a full-on war between monsters. Ezekiel praised Lloyd. She couldn't believe how insanely strong he was, and she grilled him about how he trained, but Lloyd just shrugged calmly and said he simply gathered the materials. Ezekiel couldn't believe what she was hearing. Lloyd snapped that the materials weren't common at all, they were rare ingredients from unknown lands like the White Sands. Ezekiel froze dead in his tracks. Wait, was this for real? After all, she clocked centuries grinding her skills in those exact places. And right in front of her stands a boy who's trekked through those cursed lands too and lived. Her heart clenches with terror and maybe even a sting of envy. Later she finally cracks. She was the very first subordinate of the Lord of Demons. He taught her this: if you want to crush fear in any shape, you've got to bring out boundless strength. But her strength failed her, so they marked her for condemnation, then shipped her to the White Sands for a full millennium of training. Ezekiel screamed in pure despair. This place was literal hell. Even the toughest of hearts wouldn't make it a few days, yet she'd endured it for centuries and still it wasn't enough. Now Lloyd was trapped in those same sands too, and fear and rage twisted together in his chest. Then the demon lord's voice thundered through the nightmare. Enough! Not a command, fate. Every single day, Ezekiel got dragged through pure torment, blistering heat, brutal pain, and crushing loneliness. She clung to life with nothing but stubborn will. And Lloyd? He spotted the same nightmares in himself, because for him it was hell too. He'd already trekked those endless dunes more times than he could count, and now when her story hit him, it finally clicked. The pain was real. She kept herself alive by chewing down monster flesh, all while seething with hatred for her own master. The demon finally clocked who she was, and after 1,000 years of brutal training, he erupted in praise for her unbreakable endurance. Like a reward, he let her step beside him at the front line, and she thanked him with all her heart. Time gnawed at her loyalty until it finally crumbled away. When the demon lord finally crumbled during the hero's fight, Ezekiel drove his strike straight into the back, one crushing hit, and that was it. She captured him. Human records claim the demon was just injured and vanished, but that's a lie. Iris didn't clutch some artifact, she held the demon lord's shadow itself. That jaw-dropping revelation hit everyone like lightning. Ezekiel burst into the truth. The demon lord had been living among humans for ages, biding her time, and then she struck, pulling strings to puppet monsters, tricking the prince, and even wearing the disguise of Saint Roland to carry out the whole deadly scheme. She slipped into the human world and pulled every string from the shadows. Then Iris blurted out, stunned, "If the demon's trying to wipe out humanity, why is Ezekiel fighting so hard to become its vessel?" Ezekiel finally drops the truth. She isn't just fighting, she's hunting a bigger crown. She wants to surpass the Lord of Demons, and this revenge is personal. Her win won't be some brutal demon lord kind of takeover. She's tangled fate in a deadly web of betrayals and shadows, steering every destiny just to wipe out every last trace of that demonic ruler. For her, this is the only real, hard-hitting revenge, full stop. Lloyd had to admit her stamina, her brains, her ruthless planning were terrifyingly good, but he couldn't just shut his eyes to the fallout. Roland, Minerva, and all those innocent people, crushed under her fanatical little game. She unleashed Iris, twisted Ruby's fate, and made her scramble for materials to fuel her ambitions. No matter how genius the plan looked, this is unforgivable. Ezekiel once prayed that Lloyd would finally understand her. Maybe she wanted to sympathize, but now everything's crumbling and the truth hits hard. This is where she loses. Lloyd's sudden presence blew up her perfect plan in an instant, and she snaps to a decision. If this doesn't work here, then we'll pack up their dreams and dump their ambitions into a brand new country. But before that, she'll wipe out anyone who dares step in her way. A black raven spotted the Roland region swallowed by pure chaos, and Ruby, utterly lost, couldn't make sense of what on earth was going on. Immortality can't save you in a hell like this. You've got to find a way back home fast, because right then a massive shadow crashes down over them and a gigantic monster finally shows up. Ruby shrieked in pure panic, stumbling backward like the world was slipping away. She pleaded with the raven to do something, summon a clone, cast a spell, anything, but the raven just shook its head and said, "Against this monster, no chance." And even if they somehow beat it, other monsters would rip them apart the moment they stood up. She wouldn't hand over the collected materials. Ruby refused instantly. Right on the battlefield, Lloyd snapped at Ezekiel. He was done letting her take the next move. And he's not letting her have the baby, no matter what it costs. Ezekiel snapped for his monsters to slam their attacks into Lloyd, because if he goes down, nobody's stopping her. She bragged that as the demon lord she could regen forever and that resistance was pointless. Monsters surged into the fight and right away Lloyd slammed his protective magic into place. Brutal combo attack slammed into the cathedral, shaking the whole place. The moment she leaned in, the building started to crumble beneath her weight. Ezekiel clocked it instantly. Lloyd's defense was starting to buckle under the pressure. After all, no matter how hard he tried, his time in the Great Sands just wasn't enough to survive a hit like that. And somehow Lloyd was still on his feet, standing there like he refused to fall. He slammed the trigger on a brand new spell, Explosion X16. Ezekiel couldn't even blink. She was staring at something unreal. A shield built to guard an entire cathedral, and somehow 10 years of training still hadn't prepared her for it. Lloyd moved like he already knew what would happen, so fast her mind couldn't catch up. This wasn't just a battle, it felt like a war between gods. She felt it in her bones. This wasn't going to be an easy win. Iris suddenly screamed and Lloyd snapped into motion, dodging the strike at the last second before slamming back with a brutal counterattack. Ezekiel blasted a wave of magic, and Lloyd shot up another protective spell the second it hit. The blast rattled the entire battlefield, and right then Lloyd sensed it. Some master had crashed into the fight. Iris snapped an icy spear forward to back him up, shot a worried look, and asked if he was okay. Lloyd turned and thanked her. Ezekiel snapped at her allies, calling them nothing but a burden, and from her end they were just a needless hindrance. Right then, a fresh wave of monsters crashed into the fight. Klaus Beard raised his aim at Lloyd, while Ezekiel's taunts dragged the memories of those sands right back to the surface, but Klaus just stayed silent. Every ounce of his focus locked onto the colossal monsters charging closer. Pressure kept rising until a fresh explosion tore through the ground, and Tururu stared from a distance as a flash lit up the sky, magic so powerful it felt unreal. Aisal snapped in shock. So what kind of monster is Lloyd up against? Amid the chaos, desperate screams for help tore through the air. Ezekiel's familiars snapped and went feral, slamming into the battlefield and unleashing chaos that left the soldiers reeling. How on earth could anything that massive even exist? The monster shot forward on a dead sprint, and Aisal snapped into action, activating his lightning sword technique. Her attack slammed into a wall. His magical defense was so powerful it stopped the strike dead. She rang up Cephalia, and the two of them charged headfirst, unleashing a secret double sword strike that snapped the fight wide open. Tururu tilted her head, watched for a beat, and then locked eyes on Aisal's heel. Aisal snapped at Cephalia, firing off a furious lecture because she wasn't feeling up for training again. Then Cephalia just grinned back. She swore Aisal's smell was like candy, and that thought yanked her attention off everything else, right as Aisal's face went hot with a blush because she hadn't baked a single thing in a week. Honestly, why does this girl always have food on the brain? Sophia confessed that Nero always whipped up something delicious for her after every battle, and Aisal sucked in a breath and swore that once it was finally over, she'd bake Sophia the biggest cake of her whole life. Lloyd couldn't keep fighting anymore, so the others rushed in and took the battle from his hands. Aisal and Cephalia unleashed their double technique again, hitting in perfect sync like one unstoppable force. Ezekiel frowned in irritation. These weren't just giggly sweet tooths, they were real warriors, and then she wheeled on the holy knights and ordered, "Fight now." Stunned, she couldn't help thinking, did someone really just beat one of my monsters? Lloyd, eyes locked on the battlefield, knew it was Aisal and Cephalia who pulled it off, but a cloud of doubt still wouldn't lift. If Aisal can survive it solo, if only he can finally summon that water dragon. Just then, a colossal monster lunged at Iris. Then an arrow materialized out of thin air and slammed straight through its body. Lloyd ripped the shot, and right beside Iris a weird glowing sphere materialized, snapped her out of it, then blasted forward into an all-out attack. Everyone snapped their heads toward the ball as it burst into flames, and the crowd immediately started yelling that it was scorching. Lyra tore out of the sphere, scorched and fuming. She came so close to burning up. Mars popped in right beside her and snapped that he'd warned her to ditch the bag. Lloyd went pale. Seriously, how on earth did they end up here? Mars told Lyra that back in Minerva they ducked into his object box. At first it was just the two of them, sprinting to survive, but soon the box swallowed more and more refugees, and in all that chaos they finally vanished without anyone even noticing. But that wasn't even the end of the reinforcements. Two former prisoners exploded into the brawl, screaming that they had to protect Lady Iris, and one of them swore it was time to unleash a brand new skill. Iris froze in shock as the Adventurers Guild burst in to help. Then one of them stepped up to the monster and roared that, as an A rank, he refused to be brushed aside. But Ezekiel just stayed cold and unmoved, like those little fry couldn't change a thing. Suddenly, Isal came roaring back into the fight, slashing Ezekiel with a vicious double strike, and the demonic mistress felt the heat rising. Then real heroes closed in on Lloyd and he caught their faces, yelling at Isal and Sephilia. Isal barked, "Move now!" She'd latch onto Ezekiel and everyone else would swarm the opening. They all nodded, knowing this was it, their shot to fight for the people, for Iris, and to torch the evil roots that had dragged suffering onto their fearless leader. Ezekiel barked the order to the last of his servants: build a shield wall around her, no excuses, no limits. Iris hurled an icy spear and Isal smashed in with a double strike, pure strength, pure courage, no hesitation. More fighters slammed into the general attack, then a voice like a command thundered across the battlefield. Someone had unleashed a double spell of silence. Ezekiel snapped around, jaw tight. Lloyd was the one behind it, eyes blazing with pure determination. He didn't just wander those white sands anymore, he'd broken free of loneliness and now allies stood shoulder to shoulder behind him. Everyone synced up and launched their strike in perfect unison, pouring every ounce of power straight into Ezekiel. Lloyd started chanting the spell, and a surge of raw, concentrated power detonated right on target. Ezekiel jerked in shock, blood bursting out as the hit landed. Lloyd knew it found its mark. Everything shattered for her. Most of her supporters were already dead, and retreat was never an option because she couldn't afford to lose, not now. She remembered the fight that happened 10,000 years ago, replaying in her mind as she huddled in the corner. So tell her, is there any asterisk way forward left? Someone by the sidelines snapped, "Come on, how much longer is she going to stretch this out?" At that exact moment, a figure dropped out of one of the transport monsters and hit the ground with a grim thud. Ruby. Half awake, she gasped out Lloyd's name. Lloyd blinked in disbelief, stunned by what she looked like right then, and Ezekiel smirked, dark, ominous, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Lloyd shot a confused look at Ruby, totally lost as to why she was even there. And when it hit, Ruby snapped at him, irritated and wiped out. Ever since he walked out of the atelier, her world spiraled into chaos, while Lloyd stood there, struck dumb and frozen in shock. Ezekiel stepped in, dripping sarcasm as he praised Ruby for snagging every last material they needed. Then she went full ruthless mode, kicking her and the Black Crow aside. Everyone froze in disbelief when her aggression erupted out of nowhere. With Ezekiel's cloak hovering over her, she reached in and yanked out a familiar object, and Lloyd instantly knew it. That alchemical cauldron wasn't just any pot, it was the exact one from the atelier, the same thing they used to make miracles. Ezekiel declared it would be reborn, turned into a weaponized ride that would let them storm into brand new lands. Isal snapped to the truth. She was brewing something inside that cauldron and it was terrifying. They rushed in to stop her, but a monstrous giant slammed in front of them. This was the very last summoned protector, and it wasn't about to let anyone pass. Ezekiel darted in and shoved a glowing substance into the cauldron. Then from the bubbling abyss, something took shape, an alchemical crown that could bend space for transfer. The second she stepped in, Isal barked for a fresh attack. Then, right alongside Sephilia, they fired off their double strike again. They barreled at the defense, but the moment they struck, Ezekiel was already gone and everyone just stalled, scanning for her anywhere. The air turns electric and boom, there it is. A glowing magic circle forming right on the ground. Lloyd clocked him immediately and snapped, ordering everyone to fall back fast. That spell wasn't normal at all, it was straight-up teleportation, the same kind they showed us in the workshop before. Lyra frowned, asking if that meant Ezekiel had actually slipped away. Then, out of nowhere, someone in the crowd screamed and pointed straight ahead. A colossal figure barreled closer, every step made it loom bigger and the whole crowd stopped breathing. Did Ezekiel just summon a brand new monster? Lloyd snapped back calmly. Nah, it wasn't a summoning at all, it gulped up the mana from every vanished monster. It was a wild fusion. Multiple magical circles overlapped at once, snapped into each other, and fused into something brand new. And that could only mean one thing: Ezekiel herself fused with her monsters. Everyone went stone still, their hearts slamming as the brand new monster appeared, twisted, grotesque, and drenched in supernatural horror. Out of the giant monster tore a warped, all too familiar fury, Ezekiel's voice snapping through the chaos, calling Lloyd a traitor for trusting the ones who wanted peace. Lloyd didn't flinch. It was those people who pulled him out when Ruby had him caged, and now they weren't just allies to him, they were family. But she didn't care about his feelings. Anger and despair burned in her voice as she snapped, "Look at me, now." That monstrous, twisted body wasn't just a form, it was pure power made flesh, her final transformation, forged out of despair and burning hatred as she unleashed her wrath on a world that betrayed her. Ezekiel tore apart every dream he ever believed in, until nothing was left. And that's why he had to vanish fast. Lloyd wasted no time and slammed down the protective barrier. The warped monster shot in like a bullet, and the magical shield exploded with light, until its sheer strength crushed everything. The shield split with a brutal crack and hairline fissures spiderwebbed across it. Lloyd clenched his teeth and fought to keep that barrier standing while Lyra's scream tore through the air. This wall is done. He had no choice but to admit it. Ezekiel's power absolutely dwarfed everything he'd ever faced before. He genuinely craved the strength to beat her, but it felt hopeless now, like defeat was already written. Iris saw the fight leaving his eyes as he struggled. Without a single pause, she bolted straight at him, and the monster twitched, suddenly sensing her closing in. Trouble hit him hard when it came to holiness. Ezekiel just snorted, scoffing that Iris's magic was nothing but a weak puff of wind, but Iris knew the truth. That tiniest spark of holiness tore through the monster's merge, yanking her away from Lloyd, and now he's scrambling, asking if holy magic could be supercharged with the energy from Roland's temple, but the real question hits next. Where is it? Iris shot back behind that mountain ridge. Lloyd measured the distance, and even with everything so huge, he swore he'd reach it, leaving Iris stunned by his absolute confidence. Isal instantly got the plan, like it clicked in his head the second he heard it. He just needed 5 heartbeats. Smoke curled inside the dome and swallowed the battlefield. Ezekiel snapped tense, heart hammering. Is this a trap? Though he's willing to sacrifice himself just to bait her out. She was totally fed up with the game. Then Isal and Syphilia shot up into the sky, blazing a path through the air. Iris spotted what was going down and lunged to stop them, but Ezekiel had already taken aim, because if those two matter to her, she'll burn them to ashes. Suddenly Isal threw out the signal. This was it, and Lloyd snapped into action. He spat the spell Vines of Shackles, and right on cue, out in some far-off place, the temple of Roland exploded with life. Vines tore out of its walls and ripped the whole temple up from the ground. Lyra froze in pure shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. Lloyd ripped an entire temple apart, forged it into a weapon, and hurled it straight at Ezekiel. Iris went rigid. This was a sanctuary, but Lloyd snapped at her to cling even tighter and slammed the body enhancement spell into action. He rocketed into the air, clutching Iris tight, and flew straight into that shockwave. When the temple slammed into that monster, everything erupted and shook. One massive explosion ripped through the air. And they came rushing back to the cathedral. Lloyd gently set Iris down on the magical teleportation circle. This was it. The moment hit, and she nodded back. This is their final showdown. Then the circle bursts to life and snaps into action. Light spilled all around Iris, and her body glowed like the first sunrise. Ezekiel shuddered, and the monster abruptly froze, its senses screaming that terrifying magic had just surged. Fear ripped through her voice. Her body started to shake, her form blurring like it couldn't hold together anymore. Right before the soldier's eyes, she swayed, and the invincible fusion finally began to fall apart. But then wham, fresh power erupted from the monster's mouth like a shockwave. Lloyd steadied himself and leaned in, gripping his staff as he stared through it. He snapped his spell, Explosion, and the blast slammed into the target dead on. Ezekiel got ripped straight out of the mass of flesh, and it crumbled away the second it lost its grip on him. She only rasped, "No, this can't be," while chaos swallowed everything around her. Above the ruins, Lloyd and Iris stood shoulder to shoulder, staring down the sky and admitting just how brutally close it all came to ending them. Iris, choked up with emotion, burst into his arms like she couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she thanked him right there for the fight, and swore to protect her people with everything she had. Lloyd froze in shock, but warmth still hit his chest. He broke into a smile and answered their gratitude, then his eyes snapped to the temple, shattered and scarred but somehow still standing. At that exact moment, a battered, beat-up Ezekiel struggled to rise, then she refused to let it end there. She swore this wasn't over. If she could rebuild that transfer circle, summon monsters, and heal herself, she'd claw her power back, but before she could, they cut her off because the crown was already gone. Ruby stood beside the Black Crow, clutching the crown she'd managed to snatch from the chaos. Ruby stood tall over the battered figure, and he instantly clocked her. she was the former slave he'd never forget. Even now, Ezekiel was sure she could crack it if she had to, but her eyes stayed locked on the crown, the prize she was chasing. Ruby studied the artifact, and that's when she realized it let her merge with the monsters. This idea grabbed her mind, and even she wouldn't dare entertain it. The black crow ruffled its feathers and sensed her secret intentions. But Ezekiel, bleeding and battered, snapped a warning: this is pointless because human bodies can't take that kind of thing. Then she demanded an alchemical pot from the raven. Ruby watched every move, and memories of an old procedure came rushing back. Then I grabbed the leftover stuff, made a couple tweaks, and plotted a brand new route. The woman froze in shock when she watched Ruby rip a demonic instrument apart and remake it into a living human body. The crook was in full panic. He swore the intervention would spark a disaster, but Ruby just shrugged it off like it was nothing because she was Ruby Alchemy, the brilliant alchemist the capital had to be proud of. The magical circle finally ignites, then a blinding burst of light erupts, and something incredible starts forming right before their eyes. A blazing pillar of light tore straight through the sky, then, right after, a silence hit so hard it felt like breathing stopped. Lloyd snapped back to himself and blurted out for his friends right away. I checked Isal and Saphilia and their replies hit hard. He really did turn out to be exceptional. Iris stepped up and slammed in temporary healing. But Lloyd couldn't shake the dread crawling in his chest, so he decided to go see what happened to Ezekiel and make sure Ruby was close too. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding glow swallowed everything. A massive shadow swallowed the horizon, and its magical aura crushed the life out of everything around it. Iris's blood went cold with horror. Wait, was Ezekiel really resurrecting someone? But the truth hit, and it wasn't anything like she feared. The monster snapped Lloyd's name like it already knew him. His heart lurched with fear: Ruby. Everyone froze in shock. His soul barely even knew her anymore. Ruby looked like someone else entirely. Iris leaned in and said it was worse than any nightmare Lloyd had ever tried to warn him about. Isal guessed Ruby had pulled out the alchemical item Ezekiel, but her reasons were a total mystery. Now, with unstable power blasting through her, Ruby menaced the whole country and demanded Lloyd come to the front. When he didn't show up, she snapped and unleashed total destruction, spitting flames that swallowed the entire landscape. The Iris froze in terror as the flames raged and burned the mountains of Roland to cinders, while even the Black Raven just watched in deadly silence. Ruby swore she'd get revenge on every single soul that had tortured her whole life, and her maniacal laughter tore through the chaos, until she remembered she had one thing to do first. Talk to Lloyd, and that's when Lloyd snapped back with a curse. Shaking with fury, he demanded answers. What happened to her, and why would she take this path? Ruby snapped back with contempt, grinning that she loved having him below looking up at her. Lyra's trying to smash him body and soul while she taunts him, picturing Lloyd finally cracking and begging, promising he'll never leave her, and Lyra snaps back, do we really have to become monsters for this? Mars just growls that Lloyd doesn't stand a chance, even when things are normal. Ruby heard those words and snapped to attention while Lyra scrambled to steer the talk away. Then Iris stepped up, backing Lloyd hard, declaring he was the hero who saved the country, so what more could Ruby possibly want? But she wouldn't listen. She snapped at everyone like they were sneering at her and swore Lloyd just never got what she was trying to say. She reminded him that Lloyd had been part of her life since childhood. They'd grown up side by side in that orphanage, and she knew him inside out. Ruby's words stabbed into her. Lloyd was nothing but an idiot who only mattered for magic, and without her he'd be eaten long ago. Lloyd broke down in tears, and Iris finally understood the truth. This wasn't the Ruby from his nightmares. This one was worse and far colder. She snapped her hand, telling Lloyd to stay ready because the monster's massive head was coming in fast. But the moment it hit her, her whole soul was shaken. Isal even admitted that she used to look down on Lloyd too. At first he looked sketchy and downright dangerous to her. Lloyd froze in shock. He'd never heard anything like that before, not even once. Then Isal broke it down and said her mind had changed a long time ago. On that shared road, Lloyd didn't just travel, he transformed, turning into more than talent, into a real, undeniable hero. They backed her up, telling everyone how he crushed Iris, how he shattered the demon threat, and how Roland's invasion finally got stopped in its tracks. Saphilia added, even his brown eyes feel divine, and Lloyd sincerely thanked everyone for backing him up. Ruby brushed off every word like it meant nothing, just nonsense to her. But to Iris, that rage wasn't only cruelty, it carried this crushing, heartbreaking sadness underneath. Even with the fury blazing, the truth was loneliness, and Ruby insisted, no, Lloyd hadn't changed. She shot back that nothing could twist his true self that easily, then slammed his victories as if they were worthless. Her screams wouldn't die, at least not in her mind, because Lloyd was still nothing but a worthless joke. Iris lunged in to calm him, but Ruby cut in again. She said these people had known him for just a few months, yet they still played like they understood everything. What fools. The moment she picked up Lloyd, everyone feared him, but now he's out there in a fairy tale world acting like he's got friends. Ruby spat, calling it a lie, trust, understanding, kindness, like it's all just a childish show that means nothing. Then boom, an explosion ripped through the air and Lloyd tore free of her grip as the blast shockwave blasted everything around them. Ruby, trembling and bleeding, fought her way back to Lloyd on shaking hands and knees. But he slammed the attack again, and the blast hurled her even farther across the chaos. Lloyd planted himself in the scorched earth, speaking through a haze of pain, and finally admitted the truth. No matter how loud the accusations got, he couldn't shake the fear that deep down it might have been his fault. But there's one thing he'll never let happen. He'll never stand by while anyone tries to diminish the bonds he built with his friends. Lyra, Mars, and the others barely breathed as they were carried along in total silence. Iris stared at him and finally saw real rage burn in his eyes for the very first time. Ruby clenched her teeth, and Lloyd's stubborn determination hit her like a punch to the gut. But instead of another burst of rage, she let out a bitter, resigned breath because it was still Lloyd. She leaned in, wished him luck, and told him to go all in and fight with everything he had. But Lloyd wasn't going to back down. Rage was boiling inside him, and she was about to pay for every last thing she'd done. Ruby froze in shock, wondering if he was truly mad, because the way he never understood a single thing made it feel downright hilarious. Her mind crashed straight into the past, dinner time, and that night they served pot au feu, the one dish that made her gag with pure disgust. At the table, they thanked the alchemist for the money he'd thrown at the shelter. Then he leaned back and said it all started with his daughter, Catherine's idea. Catherine, this young aristocrat, pushed everyone to thank her with perfect manners, and the crowd did it right away, one voice, one chorus of gratitude. Someone even blurted out that her thanks are why the children learn compassion so early, and another swore she matches her bloodline. Steady, reliable, and truly noble. Ruby stared at her food, gripped the fork so tight her knuckles whitened, couldn't swallow a bite, so she quietly shoved her whole portion to Lloyd. In the dead quiet, her mind went up in flames. Doesn't anyone notice the arrogance, or hear how every single word drips pure condescension? Soon, every single kid was lined up and ready to get tested in a skills check. Ruby can't help but wonder, why does she even have to do this in the first place? The coach lit up with praise for Lloyd's magic and demanded he keep training, so Lloyd just nodded along, obedient as ever. Days dragged on as he kept hurling water spheres at that stone from sunrise to midnight without stopping. The guildmaster declared that if he ever cracked that stone, he'd earn his spot in the guild, though Ruby knew the odds were basically against him, and she watched from a distance, heart pounding. His stubborn streak drove her nuts. Why was he treating adult jokes like they were sacred law, and how many more years was he actually going to keep acting like this? But day after day, the roar of water splashing against the stone got louder and louder, drowning out everything else. One day, a brutal roar ripped through the air, then a chunk of the boulder exploded into shards and Ruby's eyes went wide. Lloyd's heart lit up when the master praised his progress and said he'd done in no time what others chase for years, then dropped the promise that when Lloyd grows up, he'll finally be allowed to join the guild. Ruby, choked by jealousy, snapped to the truth. If she had real power, no noble would ever dare look down on her again because power rewrites the rules, and from that moment she swore she'd become the greatest alchemist with Lloyd right there as her assistant. Right now, Lloyd slammed into Ruby with everything he had. He couldn't shake the way she'd torment him every single day, dragging him into deadly places, dangling a scrap of bread for every job, until Ruby snapped back and he realized with a sick jolt that it was his own fault for biting the most obvious trap. Her naivety set her teeth on edge. She laughed at him for wanting to see everyone again, and then memories came flooding in. Ruby yanked open the old building's door and with a sharp, solemn promise declared, "From today, this is our home." Lloyd blinked in shock, so they really were getting their own studio. Place was wrecked, sure, but to Ruby, even broken walls beat a life in an orphanage. Lloyd, as usual, latched onto the old cabin's special charm like it was their lifeline. Ruby just scoffed at his optimism and shoved the document into his hands. The moment she got certified, the very next message landed with her first official mission, and determination lit a fire in her chest as they promised to pour everything they had into it. Later on, a full-blown argument erupts between them, and Ruby starts it off with the potion she's absolutely sure will work. Still, the merchant booted him out and jabbed at the scratched leaf on the decoration, and all she caught was raw arrogance and cold disdain. Lloyd bitterly swallowed it all. He admitted he didn't have the skills to gather the materials, but Ruby wasn't buying apologies for a second. She snapped and swore she'd prove her greatness and crush whoever dared disrespect them, and knowing Lloyd was hurting too only fueled her resolve. She didn't care if the man in front of her wore a crown or carried a noble title. She'd smash them all, no exceptions, and in her heart she swore Lloyd would never leave her side. Then one day that faith cracked fast. While everyone whispered with thrilled excitement about the young noble alchemist Lady Alchimia, Ruby snarled, dripping pure disdain. Suddenly, a girl stepped up, smiled politely, and introduced herself, Catherine, and the moment she mentioned she'd seen Ruby's alchemy with her own eyes, Ruby froze solid. Catherine dipped low and Ruby's triumphant grin burst to life, because at last she was on top. She answered with pure restraint and breathtaking grace, so much so that nobody could see the orphan in her anymore. Because she isn't just anyone, she's Ruby Alchemia, honored and instantly recognized. When she finally got back home, she barreled straight to Lloyd to spill her joy, but he was cooking dinner, and not just anything pot au feu, a thin soup straight from the shelter, and Lloyd admitted he was craving the taste of home. For him, those memories hit like a wave, pure nostalgia. And for Ruby, it's pure betrayal. She fought tooth and nail to claw free of the past, but Lloyd suddenly yanks her back and she can't take it anymore. I slapped the bowl right out of his hands, screamed the truth, and watched his face drop. She's hated that potion her whole life, and he still can't get it. Lloyd stared, utterly lost. He couldn't even spot the problem, but Ruby was exploding beside him, so if he didn't care, she'd leave him to eat alone because he was still that same fool she remembered from the orphanage. Rage surged through her. Nothing he said made sense to her, not even after everything they'd been through, and she was so furious she nearly lunged for him. But Iris cut in like lightning. She grabbed Ruby's attention and reminded her what really matters. No matter how much it hurt, my friends always showed up right by my side. So that's it, pain and rage are the only fuel, right? Or is there another way to push forward? Her words slammed into the air, and both of them froze mid-breath. Memories crashed back like thunder, and Ruby pushed Lloyd to grind through the nights. She set her sights on impressing the queen with her massive project, while Lloyd, worn out and running on, yanking the next stones into place like a construction storm while they were throwing lights all across the capital. That sounded like a brilliant plan at first, but the moment they tried to put it into action, it turned into an absolute nightmare. Even so, Lloyd couldn't shake the worry for Ruby, but she pushed forward anyway because that dream was right within reach. They had nothing, no family, no money, just living under the wealthy's cold, ruthless contempt. Their days felt hollow, like every heartbeat was missing something. But if they can light up the entire city, then for once, something in this world will finally be theirs for real. Right now, Ruby towers over Lloyd and unloads insult after insult on him. I tore into him, calling him an idiot, a fool, and downright slow-witted. And then fool Lloyd. And then bam, it rips through the air, detonating into a blinding surge of energy. In the blink of an eye, it vanishes into the clouds, blasting up into the sky, and Lloyd is left alone. No reconciliation ever came. There was still a massive chasm between them.